as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you. It's Sunday, the 30th of March, and this is Weekend Breakfast this Sunday morning with me, James Max, in for Dr. David Bull with you until 10 o'clock this morning on Talk. So, coming up, going to be joined very shortly by former Conservative Special Advisor Lauren McEvitt to go through today's top stories and review the front pages. Shortly before 8, we'll hear from Ryan Saby. He's the Deputy Political Editor for The Sun. And then after 8, not as in the chocolate, of course, former Labour MP Simon Danchuk and Paul Richards, a former Labour advisor. They'll be going head-to-head. Plus, I'll be joined by Piers Pottinger. He'll give us the big political stories of the day. And we'll have a right royal roundup. Could there be a few royal stories in the news today? I think so. And luckily, we'll be speaking to Angela Levin about those. Plus, we'll hear about a brand new podcast from Amy Hart, and she'll be talking about her Mum's Club podcast. And we'll find out about the 1989 Ford Escort that is worth a fortune, and a bunch of old clothes. And if that wasn't enough, to all mums, Happy Mother's Day. And also, we hope to hear from you. This morning, going to be discussing where the police's priorities should lie. Also, what MPs can, maybe can't or shouldn't claim for their expenses. And as the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, sets out her priorities, what should be done about the thousands of immigrants who arrive legally but overstay their welcome? What a veritable feast. Very good morning to you. And if you haven't realised, yes, the clocks went forward. You lost an hour. I'm so sorry. You lost an hour's sleep. It was a little bit shocking as the alarm went off this morning. And the thing is, right, so I'm in utter state of confusion because all the technology updates automatically, but the watches and the clocks that are manual, old-fashioned, certainly do not. So there we go. It is currently 4 minutes past 6 o'clock and it's still a bit dark outside. Anyway, all sorts of stories to discuss with you this morning, but I do want to talk about Yvette Cooper. She has pledged to end jobs on tap for illegal immigrants by closing loopholes in Britain's lax border laws. The Home Secretary has vowed to restore order to the asylum system, and this is along with all the other things that we've heard from both her and indeed her colleagues about, and also predecessors, to be honest. Oh, stop the boats, well, that didn't happen. Talking about smashing the gangs. No, one of the reports in the papers talks about £200 million a year that those gangs seem to rake in, but yet nobody seems to be able to do anything about it. And meanwhile, Yvette Cooper's been talking about the difficulty of dealing with people who arrive legally and then they overstay their welcome. And then they start getting jobs here, there and everything and just disappear into the ether. So that's why I want to ask you the question. Yes, we'll talk about what Yvette Cooper has said and what she says she's going to do. But I want to know from you, what should be done about the thousands of immigrants who arrive legally but overstay their welcome, start claiming asylum, all sorts. 0344 499 1000. That's the telephone number. You can, of course, send me a text, 87222. Start your text with the word talk, and you can X me, tweet me, whatever, at talkTV, or send a WhatsApp message, 0344 499 1000. Right, so as I said to you, phone lines will be open, so as soon as you want to have your say, do give me a call and we'll get you on air. Meanwhile, I think it's about time that we turned our attention to the front pages. Join me in the studio, Lauren McKevitt, former Conservative Special Advisor. Good morning, Lauren.
Good morning.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. All sorts of things on the papers this morning. I mean, let's start with the Sunday Times.
Lots of goodies.
Lots of goodies. Met smashed down door of Quaker meeting house to arrest activists. I mean, I'm all up for stopping protests that get in our way, but it does seem a little bit, alongside the story that we had yesterday in the Times about, indeed, one of our colleagues who from Times Radio, who him and his wife were arrested, put in a cell for 8 hours because the Met decided that they needed to be interviewed in relation to, shall we say, a localised dispute with their school. Meanwhile, here we have more than 20 Metropolitan Police officers broke down the front door of a Quaker meeting house to arrest 6 women who had met to discuss climate change in Gaza. Now, I may or may not agree with those activists and what they were saying and what they were planning to do, but I thought that we lived in a country that didn't do and take action until fundamentally you'd kind of done it.
Yeah, and I think what's very interesting about this is that it's the Quakers. You know, the Quakers have a long history of non-violent activism. Elizabeth Fry, who ended up on the £5 note, was a Quaker.
Yes.
This is not an unusual thing for Quakers to be discussing, is the state of the world and their concerns for the people within it. But normally, you know, behind closed doors and working out how to do non-violent activism, that's always really been their standpoint.
It has been, but also a Met spokesman said 6 women had been arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to cause a public nuisance amid fears of a sit-down protest in the capital. Well, I mean, I don't want sit-down protests in the capital. I don't really like the idea of our daily lives being disrupted. But I like even less the idea that somebody's front door can be knocked down, the police go in heavy-handed, when, frankly, we've got crime rife on our streets, we've got drug dealing almost openly, we've got people being abused on our streets, not necessarily feeling safe, all these other things. What the heck are the police doing?
It's a really good question, and I think the police action, but the police view on protests has been uncomfortable for a lot of people for a long time.
But it's been uncomfortable because on one hand, they've taken very swift action on some aspects of it, but on other aspects, if you are, for example, Jewish and live in the UK... That's
the point I was exactly about to make. Is 60,000 people walking towards the US Embassy a couple of times a month, protesting about actions in Palestine, which are nothing to do with the UK government.
I didn't realise that Palestine was a place.
Well, the Gaza Strip.
There we go.
You know, that's a lot of people blocking up a lot of London on a fairly regular basis, irritating quite a number of people who believe in the other side of that particular argument.
And it's not actually that it's irritating, it's actually that it is... intimidating and threatening.
Yeah, it is.
And yet, you know, here we have this story, which I do find astonishing, and I'm sure we will come back to discuss the reach or overreach of policing. Meanwhile, another day, another migrant story. About 10,000 people who arrived here on work and student visas have since claimed asylum and are living in taxpayer-funded hotels and other accommodation. Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, wants eligibility checks to stop such abuse. Now, I applaud Yvette Cooper for wanting to deal with it. How did we get here? How did we get to this place that millions, if not billions of pounds is being spent on asylum seekers, asylum processes, that we seem not to know who's in our country, we seem not to be able to have an effective visa system that says that you have a visa and then it's no longer valid. You go to the States and your visa runs out, you're out.
It is incredibly difficult to remove people from the United Kingdom, and the reason it's incredibly difficult is because of the European Court of Human Rights. That's it. And the Conservative Party are actually talking about how to leave ECHR. And we had a debate about it during the leaders' competition. It is incredibly difficult legally to do this.
With respect, I think anybody from Reform will happily tell you that they have similarly put forward that notion and are probably more advanced
when the
with their
four
thinking.
of them left in the House of Commons can get into a lift with slightly more people, perhaps they'll have a bigger voice on it.
Yeah, that's a bit of an arrogant view, though, isn't it?
I think that Nigel Farage is running a party that, in my opinion, is always going to be the Nigel Farage show, rather than being about the issues.
But isn't that part of the problem that the Tories have, is that they had the party that was in charge, and when David Cameron was in charge, it was the David Cameron show, and he did a very effective job of it. When Boris Johnson was in charge, it was the Boris Johnson show. And now we've got the Kemi Badenoch, it's not a show, it's a shambles. We had the Liz Truss shambles. We had the Rishi Sunak damp squib. And that's the point. Good parties have strong leaders. Kemi Badenoch, where is she?
But also, good parties have strong teams. David Cameron had a strong team around him.
Sure.
You know,
so does Nigel Farage, he would argue. And that's why they're ahead, until or unless the Conservatives recognise why they lost power and some of the legislation that they've brought in and some of the things that they've done or not done. So the reason that Yvette Cooper, regardless of whether you think she's being effective or not, is having to clear up this mess is because the Tories made such an absolute catastrophic mess.
You won't have any argument from me on that. We did not do enough on this, and we should have had a much bigger conversation about how to combat the lawfare that exists around asylum issues.
But the door's flapping, and here you are telling me, you're telling me, oh yeah, we're doing all these things, but there are so many policy problems that existed out of the Tories. So the economic mess that we find ourselves isn't wholly as a result of Rachel Reeves. She's contributed, sure, but the previous mess, they were cutting the wrong taxes, they were sending the wrong messages. Michael Gove and his ridiculous nonsense with allowing councils to do double council tax. I mean, all sorts of things that they did that were very, very unconservative.
Yes.
And there are so many areas of it that to point the finger and say, well, you know, when Reform have got some, they are going to get some more MPs because they've organised themselves with policies that if you open the phone lines and say, well, what do you want? That those who are calling in will say, I want the policies that they're putting forward.
At the moment, what they're putting forward is saying things along the lines of, well, we'll just put people on planes and deport them. We'll just deport them. And that, in many respects, breaks the law. Doing this within the law of the United Kingdom is incredibly difficult, as the Conservative Party found out in government, as the Labour Party are going to find out in government. There are extraordinary numbers of people in the United Kingdom. Many of them shouldn't be here, and our legal system does not allow for us to deport them as it currently stands.
OK, does that mean that, in your view, we need a wholesale review of this?
Yes, absolutely.
OK, so does that mean, because I do remember 15, 20 years ago, there were lots of discussions about should we have identity cards? I mean, in my view, I think there are quite a few ways in which you can find out my identity. I've got a passport, I've got a driver's licence, I've got utility bills. I mean, there's a web of information that means that I can prove who I am. Surely that's enough. And if, for example, we just said, if you want to get NHS services, you are going to have to produce 2 of the following. And if you're not eligible, no. Similarly, if you want to get a job, you are going to have to produce 2 of the following. Why don't we do that? I mean, it's not hard.
2 of what, though? This is the problem.
A driver's licence, a council tax bill,
so how do you get a
utility bill?
How do you get a driver's licence? How do you pay a council tax bill? We're talking about people who do not exist within the legal system of which you are a member.
Then you're not legal, then you're out.
So if you have an asylum seeker who is here perfectly legitimately as an asylum seeker, they claimed asylum in the right fashion, then you have to have a mechanism by which they can have some form of identification.
In a camp.
Right, OK.
I mean, on the basis that we have so many people, and this is a problem across Europe, and I'm not wanting to be either inhumane or not understand that there are people who desperately need our help, as in this nation's help, and I get all of that. But until or unless we legitimise that process and really ascertain exactly who are the people who genuinely need our help and who do we want to help.
Do you know what we would do that? Temporary ID cards.
Maybe. OK.
Maybe that's something we should be talking about.
Maybe we should be saying, OK, so you can have... OK, this is good. We're formulating policy on the hoof here. And you can join in the conversation, by the way, if you wish to. 0344 499 1000. Would you support this notion that we've come up with? So if you want to go and get NHS services, you've got to produce 2 of the following. So it's either a driver's licence or a passport and a utility bill, council tax, whatever, or a temporary identity card.
Yeah.
If you can't get those other things, I mean, I think that's a brilliant solution.
So I grew up in a place that had ID cards. I think they work incredibly well.
Which was that?
Hong Kong.
Hong Kong.
And the great thing about them is the Foreign Office ran them. The Home Office didn't ever get their sticky little mitts
We
on
gave
them.
Home Kong away, didn't we?
It's very sad to me on many levels about what's happened in Hong Kong.
I mean, I suppose the thing is, it's the people who signed that lease, 99 years previously, when they did it, because they didn't sort of care about future generations or otherwise, or indeed the Hong Kongers.
Which is why the issue about the Chagos Islands is so important.
Oh, well, I mean, that was started by the previous lot and continued by the current lot.
Yeah.
What a mess.
That's a madness.
I mean,
it really is.
Why are we governed by such fools? Right. Let's talk about another story on the front page. So it's on the front page of The Sun. And it also makes it on the front page of the Sunday Times, funny enough. But The Sun have gone big on this. This is by Kate Ferguson. A senior Labour MP helping to impose $5 billion of benefits cuts is using taxpayers' cash so she can live with her cockapoo. Now, I'm all up for dogs.
Yes.
I'm a big dog lover. I have two of the things. I just call them things. Two working Cocker Spaniels. And one of them was... They are technically brother and sister. One is 5.5, one's 3.5. But one is a rescue dog because my other half's sister, about 9 months ago, rang up and said, one of our dogs has been accused of running into the neighbour's farm, and the neighbour has said, if we see your dog on our farm, it's kind of an unwritten rule of the countryside,
Yep.
because it was doing the nefarious things, chasing after her,
Yeah.
we'll shoot it.
Yep.
So she said, do you know anybody who could rehome this dog?
Oh dear.
So basically that translates as, can we have your troubled dog? So anyway, the answer was yes, and so Bam arrived, and those who listen to my shows will know all about Bam. Lovely dog. She's settled in beautifully, fantastic. Anyway, so we've got these two dogs. Dogs are expensive.
Yes, they are.
You have to insure them the older they get. Bam needed spaying. Goodbye,
Mine went through the
£750.
menopause and needed HRT. She got the rage. It was extraordinary.
Thankfully, I haven't had that. But Bam had to be spayed. Stanley ate a fish hook the other day. That was a nightmare. Had to be cut open. I think he's fine.
Glad to hear it.
But also you have to, buy their food and things. And if you go away, then you've got to. I mean, they're expensive. So, whilst I recognise that this is a cost of living, and if you are an MP, and moving them between, it's going to cost more. I don't think this is right. A senior Labour MP helping to impose $5 billion of benefits cuts is using taxpayers' cash so she can live with her cockapoo. This is Party Whip Tayo Awatemi, who's 32, has received £900 of pet rent for her dog Bella to stay at her London home. Pet rent. What the heck is that?
So, I don't have the Sun story in front of me. If I could have it for a minute, I'll show you something interesting on page 2.
Oh, here it is. All right, go on.
So where it continues on page 2, towards the end of the story, it talks about the response that IPSA, the Parliamentary Standards Authority, have given, saying that they, in fact, they apologised to the MP and said they gave her incorrect advice about the itemisation of her claim,
right?
Which means we don't actually know how many members of Parliament are claiming for pet rent on their expenses have been given different advice.
I mean, oh dear. I mean,
and Labour are going to have this problem for the next 5 years because of how much they are trying to cut the state.
But the thing is that
it's a very easy journalistic story to say you're cutting a disabled benefit here, and yet you as an individual who have to enforce this are claiming £900 for something that most people can't afford. How dare you? How dare you? They're going to have to deal with stories like this for the next 5 years because of the choices they're making in government.
Well, this is very true. But then, of course, we've seen many of those choices which they've been taking about their expenditure, and yet they still continue at a government level to accept the freebies, to use the private jets, to...
The David Lammy private jet bill is really quite something when you consider we've got a plane.
It is quite something. I
mean,
mean,
that's the reason we've got a plane.
It is, but then the thing is that plane costs money. So I think that's the
they tie in those two streams together.
It all together.
Well, I think the Foreign Secretary It's one of the reasons why it was great that David Cameron was in there, because he didn't have to be in the House. He could literally be on the road the entire time.
But you see, that's the point, is that the Foreign Secretary is going to have to travel a lot. And it is going to be expensive. But here's the thing. If you're going to tell people that they're not allowed to do things, or they shouldn't be flying, or anything else, and it's actually the other policies. So if you're going to pursue this net zero nonsense, which the last lot did, and which this lot are doing, and you're going to tell us, the public, that we've got to pay more tax because we're going on holiday once or twice a year, that we're going to have to pay more in fuel, and then they go off and they behave as if it doesn't matter, and, well, you know, they're doing official government business. It does come across as one rule for them and another for us, and that is not acceptable.
Have you seen the story that came out yesterday about the 20 MPs who signed a letter about the Pakistan airport?
Oh no, I haven't seen that.
So on behalf of their diaspora constituents, all of whom would like to be able to have another international airport, I think in Kashmir, and many of the MPs on that list of signatories oppose expanding Heathrow,
which I find again astonishing. You know, it's our MPs. And actually the legal system, which has allowed frustration, and this is, again, a rare moment of agreement with Keir Starmer, where he says, you know, get rid of the blockers. I think some of it is nefarious in terms of allowing and encouraging building across Greenbelt and various other things. But I think in terms of big infrastructure projects, which just have a different system in place, that if it's an airport, if it's a road, if it's a rail, I'm sorry, that takes precedence. But if we had a compensation scheme that wasn't so derisory and mean, a lot of people would go, okay, I don't want it, but you know, you're going to pay me enough, fine, we'll move on. It'll save us all a lot of money. Anyway.
And we wouldn't have the Bat Tunnel issue.
Oh, the Bat Tunnel. What
I
kind
love
of...
the Bat Tunnel. It's so mad.
No, I don't.
I mean, I hate the Bat Tunnel, but I love the Bat Tunnel because it's so bonkers. It's so out there. It also kills the bat.
I know. There are a lot of people who disagree with my stance on HS2. So my stance on HS2, which has been relatively public, which is I believe in big infrastructure projects. I think they made two mistakes with HS2. First of all, they should have committed the money and said HS2 is going to be the secondary phase after we've fixed what we've got. The second thing I think they should have done is they should have put more of it in tunnels, which I know cost more money, but I think when you're going through beautiful countryside, you should do everything you can to preserve it, and they didn't. And in fact, they've sort of spent the money elsewhere that they could have, if they just committed the proper investment right at the outset and said, we are going to tunnel, we are going to keep and preserve, I think a lot less people would be so upset.
Well, and of course, from Wales' perspective, this is obviously my political background, this has been badged as an England and Wales project despite going nowhere near the Welsh border, so Wales aren't getting any money for it.
Well, this is also possibly true, but I think, you know, big infrastructure projects are really important, and we make such a mess of them here. Combined, and talking of such a mess, where did we legitimise just allowing people just to leave their litter everywhere? It's disgraceful. But we'll come to that, because I'm going to get your thoughts on how we tackle that one. Combined with, if you want to get involved in the conversation, so Yvette Cooper's talked about one or two aspects of what she's going to do, and she's sort of saying the right things, but she sort of isn't. So what should be done about the thousands of immigrants who arrive legally but overstay their welcome? 0344 499 1000. That's the number. We'll get more stories from Lauren and more front pages. That's next on Talk.
It was the 29th of January. It was about 11:45, and I was in this very room. I was on a Zoom call for a work thing, and in the bit of the screen where you see yourself, I suddenly saw two police officers standing behind me. I saw the high-vis yellow of their vests. I hadn't heard them enter the house, and that was the first sign I knew that something very strange was happening. So I awkwardly tried to close down the Zoom, and a few moments later, they arrested me.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. It is 26 minutes past 6 o'clock this Sunday morning. Yes, it's me, James Max, with you till 10, March the 30th, which of course is the day, not only is it Mother's Day, yes, don't tell me you forgot. It's also the day that the clocks have gone forward. So if you're wondering what the heck's going on, what time it is, you're looking at the clock and then really, clocks have gone forward. It's daylight saving. Why we do that, I don't know. Anyway, something else that we're talking about this morning is this. Migrants seek asylum after their visas expire. 10,000 people who arrived here on work or student visas have since claimed asylum, are living in taxpayer-funded hotels and other accommodation. Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, wants eligibility checks to stop such abuse, which will involve reviewing the finances of residents. More than 38,000 migrants are in hotels, costing the Home Office £5.5 million a day. A further 65,707 are in dispersal accommodation, private dwellings. I find it absolutely astonishing, these numbers. And also, in the studio, former Conservative Special Advisor, Lauren McEvoy. Lauren, you were just saying to me in the break about one of the things that Yvette Cooper wanted to do, which didn't really sort of clock with me initially, because I thought, well, it's kind of interesting, so she wants to find people, it's the responsibility of employers and everything else. But actually what she's doing, she's kind of washing her hands of the problem by saying, sounding tough, I'm going to fine you if you do this and this and this, but not actually taking the action that's necessary. Well,
and I find this really interesting in an era where the cost of doing business is going up, national insurance contributions are going up, energy prices are high. The employment rights bill that Angela Rayner is going to bring through is going to increase the cost of doing business quite substantially. And as we talked about before the break, it's really hard to have proper identity checks because of a lack of identification that's verifiable.
And I really like that idea that you mentioned before of having the either or. Yeah. So, do I like the idea of everybody having to have papers and they're being checked left, right? No. Do I like the idea that an individual, you can prove your identity with a number of agreed methods, and if you don't have that, then that is when you apply for a temporary card. And if you don't get that card, you are out.
Exactly, and passing the onus on to business in advance of a single verifiable document for the purposes of identifying on immigration status is passing on a pretty big risk to employers.
It is.
Who at the moment do not have single ways of ensuring that the people that they are employing are allowed to be here legally.
Now, funnily enough, we've got quite a lot of incoming.
Oh, I'm not surprised.
Tony says, France doesn't put illegal migrants into hotels like the idiot British do. They give them a tent. I'm not sure they give them a tent. Steve says, what I'd like to know is exactly how did the police know there was a private Quaker meeting even taking place? This is in reference to the front page of the Sunday Times, which we've been talking about. Met smashed down door of Quaker meeting house to arrest activists. How did they know that? At least the leaders make no real secret that they operate under Orwellian rules. This country is worse than Russia and China, he says. What a vile country we've become. Stalin's Starmer has to go. We must see reform in power. I fear that if we don't get the necessary changes, we will see a rise of the much harder extreme right-wing faction who will bring untold levels of violent opposition to our streets, says Steve. Paul says, you have a driving licence, not a driver's licence. We're in the UK, not the USA. Sorry, Paul. A revolution will sweep across Western Europe. Wait and see, says Tony. Sharon says these people are having a laugh claiming pet expenses and they won't pay the waspy money they've stolen from them. This is a blooming joke, says Sharon in Staffordshire. And meanwhile, Rachel has sent you in some fan mail. Says, I'm liking Lauren. Can we have her back again?
Thank you very much.
Cheers, Rachel. I mean, I haven't heard any can we have James back again? No, you just... No.
Just as a point of order, if you will.
Yeah.
They do use hotels in France.
Oh. They do use hotels in France, says Lauren.
They have...
Do you still like her?
They have reception centres, and when they are full, they use emergency temporary accommodation, which can include hotels.
And when that's full, then they use tented cities.
France is an awful lot bigger than us.
That's very true. Right, 0344 499 1000 is the number to use if you want to get involved in the conversation. What should be done about the thousands of immigrants who arrive legally but overstay their welcome? David's in Gloucestershire. Hello, David.
Good morning, James and Lauren. How are we both?
Good morning, David. Very well, thank you. Thank you for calling. What would you like to say?
Well, basically, it's about it's about the whole asylum seeking, the whole asylum system.
Yes.
Part of the problem is, in my opinion, is the legal aid. You know, I've got no problem with, say, one appeal, but that should be it. Everything else that they should have to pay for themselves. You know, I mean, it's just ridiculous. These lawyers, they're coming up with spurious claims. I mean, we've all heard them. I mean, I know Mike Graham's got his, Migrant of the Day thing, and we all have a laugh at it, but we're not laughing because if we didn't laugh, we'd cry. You know, about some of the stuff they actually claim, oh, this is wrong and that's wrong. You know, the chap whose child couldn't go back to Albania because he's chicken nuggets, you know. It's just absolutely ridiculous what they're paying. I mean, there was one the other day, they said, there was a judge and the system, and they were arguing how old the child was, whether he was 18, was he not 18, and it cost £30,000.
Let me ask and bring Lauren into this conversation, David. So, Lauren, look, on one hand, you need to have a legal system that gives access to people who, without some kind of legal representation, might be in some way mistreated. Having said that, we also have a legal system that people can mistreat, and you and I end up paying for it. How do you strike that balance so the waste is reduced? It's never going to be eliminated, but how do you reduce it?
Well, firstly, David, I'm delighted to hear a West Country accent on the radio this early in the morning. I am from Gloucestershire, so I am delighted that there are Gloucestershire people on the radio. I am from near Cirencester.
Right, I'm the Forester Dean. So.
Excellent. And I'm
making no comment with my London accent.
And I think that James is absolutely right. We're both right. There is a lawfare issue in this country of appeal after appeal, and at the root of many of these stories, some of which are completely bonkers. You know, the rapist who can't go home because he'll be mistreated at home. There are issues to do with the European Convention on Human Rights.
So that's the thing.
The right to a family life, the right to not be persecuted in another country.
I understand the right to a family life. I think the sad thing about that is how it has been extrapolated.
And how it's interpreted. Our legal system, which is the common legal system, struggles with this in a way that the civil legal system just does not. That's why the European nations have never had as much of a problem with this as we have. It is an almost singularly UK issue.
And I think that that's a very interesting point. And David, thank you very much indeed for your call. That's an interesting point, because when people say, remove ECHR and it becomes a big thing, I don't think people understand the differences between the legal systems that we have, and therefore you're almost constantly trying to mix oil and water.
Yeah, exactly.
Because one is designed for one way of legal working and ours is designed for another. And if you mix the two, in fact, you end up with a legal system that becomes bizarre, that becomes expensive, that becomes protracted.
Well, and in a precedential system, so a system that relies on precedent, each one of these actions creates new precedent within the legal system.
Which then, of course, and when you have precedent, which means that the most legal case, if you like, then allows people to then interpret the law in a slightly different way. So you have the law which is made, and then the court system interpret it, and then that gives you the guidance. That means that people can then come back to you for more if the legal system and the legal process then changes.
And some of the most offensive elements of the ECHR issue are the things that are the most offensive to us as we read about them. You know, the rapist who is making a legal claim, for example, I'm making a hypothetical here, the rapist who makes a legal claim that says, I cannot be sent back to Iran because Iran kills rapists. And everybody here is saying, well, you know, you're a rapist, we don't want you in this country. Just because another country is going to treat you more harshly than we do isn't a good enough reason for you to be able to stay here. This is, at its root, an issue with the ECHR.
According to the Sunday Telegraph, a few years ago, a good friend and I, this is in a thing, were togged up in fluffy white dressing gowns in the grounds of a spa hotel in Northamptonshire, happily sipping Bellinis after a dip in the indoor pool. We were there for a low-key girls' getaway, which was abruptly not all low-key or girly. Wedding wars
and this is in the
tearing...
papers rather than a Jilly Cooper novel.
Yes.
Yeah, excellent.
This is wedding wars tearing the countryside apart. This is a chorus of nuptial NIMBYs, rather, as opposed to numpties, is taking issue with the rowdy wedding trade. So we've got rowdy weddings and all sorts of things going on. And as somebody who chairs a venue that does hold weddings, they can get a little bit out of control. Yeah, and it's a whole big feature.
Goodness
whole big
me.
feature in that. The reason that I'm just sort of pausing is because I'm just going to whip through another few front pages. Any bright ideas? How dim can you get? Brits, especially the younger generation, are so in the dark, even about simple tasks. They're turning to AI to tell them how to change a light bulb. I mean, this is tragic. The Mirror talks about 4 mums of missing children tell of their heartbreak on Mother's Day. They would love to find their missing children. The Sunday Express, please think of those who are suffering as the battle for assisted dying turns bitter. Campaigners issue a heartfelt plea to MPs facing the biggest decision of a generation. I mean, I'll just say, get on with it. I mean, it's just like, I genuinely don't understand anybody who thinks that it's, you know, it's their say over others. But we'll come to your views in a moment. Plus, the big story of the day. Oh, it's a whopper. And it's next on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
6:39 is the time. Very good morning this Sunday morning. It's me, James Max, with you till 10 on Talk, where we're discussing Yvette Cooper. She's talking about thousands of immigrants who arrive legally to our country, but then they overstay their welcome. So I'm asking you, what should be done about them? 0344 499 1000. Yvette Cooper says, well, you've got to have tough sanctions against people who employ them and various other things, and nail bars and vape shops and all this other thing. Yeah, fine. But I wonder whether that's just pushing the responsibility elsewhere and away from her department, which is clearly failing. 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number. Meanwhile, I promised you an absolute belter of a story. And Lauren is here, and I think she's now... I've suggested that she sedate herself prior to us talking about it, because it is such a banger. The head of Prince Harry's African charity has issued a devastating broadside against the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, describing the couple's brand as, wait for it, toxic. In a sensational interview, this is Dr. Sophie Chandorka, who's chair of Centre Barley, the organisation the Duke of Sussex co-founded to help children with HIV, accused the Prince of being responsible for harassment and bullying at scale. Now, I'm sort of fascinated by this story because initially we heard his side because he and all the trustees stepped down from the charity saying that they'd tried to remove this lady, that it wasn't working, that relationships had broken down, and they were all in the right. And she's giving another side of it. Now, we of course don't know the full extent of it, and I think that the Charity Commission will probably have to dig and rake and go through it. Because of what we know elsewhere, I'm not inclined to dismiss what this lady has to say immediately. Is that fair?
I think it's unfortunate that the Sussex brand has led to the point where broadcasters feel that way, because it's a real missed opportunity from them to have played the last 5-6 years as they have done. I
mean, put it this way, if I am involved in a major national charity.
So am I. I'm a trustee of a charity too.
Okay. So the charity that I have does have royal patronage. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't suggest that Harry should be, or indeed Meghan should be anywhere involved with this charity that I'm involved in.
I think the difference here is that this is a charity that he established.
True.
This isn't a charity that he inherited from someone else. It's not a patronage that was given to him by the late Queen or anything. He established this one. So that makes it slightly different to some of the other charities where the patronages are passed on. You know, the Queen passed on the All England Tennis Club to the Duchess of the Princess of Wales.
So I understand.
There's a slight nuance there, I think.
There is a slight nuance. So this is something that he set up. So therefore, if he set it up, do you think that then there is therefore a bigger responsibility by the trustees to ensure that his brand is still relevant? So if he were to ask and to say, can you support me on this, this is all getting a little bit, you know, is he being overbearing by asking that?
I think possibly yes. You know, my concern would be when you have a very big brand associated with another very big brand, they can bleed across very easily. And what, you know, the issues that have existed around the behaviour of the Sussexes.
I mean, should he have looked in the mirror then and said, as his brand was becoming toxic, he should have said to the trustees, even though I founded this, am I the right person to be here because?
Well, I think the difficulty then comes, you know, a lot of the proceeds from his book, I think about £1.5 million worth of the proceeds from his book went directly to the charity. Mm-hmm. So there is a financial relationship that exists with him that is over and above just being a patron, just being a figurehead. There is a financial relationship. He is giving money to the charity, which is in some financial difficulty, as it tries to pivot, quite rightly in my opinion, to African leadership rather than London-based leadership. You know, I spent many years living in Kenya and Zimbabwe. I fully believe that running things from London doesn't work and is a waste of money. So while a pivot like that is happening, you know, these things do cost money, but I think the Charity Commission are going to pay some very close attention to this charity now, and I think that's probably a good thing.
Is the Harry and Meghan brand now toxic?
I think when you see instances of stories about Meghan moving a person out of a photograph, and then the immediate response from Harry and Meghan is not, I'm really sorry you're involved in this now. It's, please can you give a statement that says I didn't do that, even when it's clear that this woman apparently feels that she was used in a bad way. She didn't want the charity or herself to be, what she said, tools in their PR machine, talking about the PR that they require in other areas. And I think that, when you have a brand, it's a charity that's trying to do good work, and you are then trying to use that charity for the purpose of PR issues you're having in other areas of your life, then I think you need to look seriously at whether or not your heart is still in the right place with regard to that charity's objectives.
I mean, I do worry, though, about some of the language that's been used, and I would say that probably all of these people are toxic. I
was going to say there's a little bit of a plague on all your houses issue going on here, which is why I think it's good to go back to the fact that the Charity Commission are looking into it, that there is a court case, rumbling along, because I think that independent adjudication is going to have to come into play here.
So she said, Harry's release of a damaging piece of news to the outside world without informing me or any of my country directors was, and I agree so far, because if something significant is going to happen and you are involved in a charity, so say for example, if I knew that something was going to be splashed or otherwise, or that there was something, I would inform my co-charity trustees and I would say, look, this is coming down the pipes. So she's got a point.
Yeah.
Having said that, without informing me of any of the charity directors, was an attack and an example of harassment and bullying at scale. I do worry about those words. I mean, bad management, fine. But when you use the word which are sort of harassment and bullying, when basically somebody just didn't do what they should have done.
And I mean, the issue that I have here is, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm only a fairly recent trustee of a charity, but my understanding is that we as trustees of a charity, and indeed a chairman of a board of trustees of a charity, do not enjoy the same employment protections that an actual employee of an organisation would enjoy.
But also you have different roles and responsibilities. So governance is
absolutely
critical.
It means that if you are in a dispute, chairman to board, etc., you don't have, right to dismissal protections, or those protections exist for employees rather than chairs and trustees.
It actually all comes down to how you are appointed, who you are appointed by, and the governance surrounding that. So you're absolutely right, it's not governed in the same way.
It does seem that there are some governance issues here. There's been a new trustee appointed who it looks like has billed the charity about £100,000. That's what this article says. I didn't think that was appropriate. I thought that you gave your services, by and large you were not remunerated.
Well, if you're a trustee, you're not remunerated, but if you have legitimate expenses which are agreed in advance, you can do so.
That's a lot of legitimate expenses.
Well, you would have thought, but then
but this is also a charity.
Not to David Lammy.
This is also a charity that the current chairman is saying, I think indicating that she was trying to move them away from the international polo match scene, which I think maybe the Sussexes won't have enjoyed very much.
And it is possible that he might have said, no, that's where I raise your money. And that is a legitimate conversation that I would side with him, and I would say, look, you might not like being associated with that, but you kind of knew.
Unless it's not bringing in any money.
Unless it's not bringing in any money. If it's just
within this, there are financial difficulties. There is a shortfall. There is money owed to the taxpayer.
And the other thing is,
I can't remember if the money's owed to the taxpayer from the previous business or from this one. It's unclear.
It is unclear. There's lots of unclear.
It's unclear.
Unclarity.
There's a lot in here that is, plague on everybody's house and fairly unclear from the reporting. So I think it makes me nervous to go too far down the line talking about it.
Indeed. Just a couple of messages. Demetrius from Cyprus says, here in Cyprus we do have ID cards that was introduced during our time as part of the empire.
Like Hong Kong?
No ID card, you get nothing.
Like Hong Kong?
Like Hong Kong. Dale, I think Hong Kong's quite different now. Hi, James says, Dale, do you know what we'll be talking about in 5 years' time? The same thing and nothing will change. You can talk about it as much as you want till the end of time, but all he's going to do is get worse and worse and worse. Keep up the good shot. He says, shot. Well, thank you, Dale, for that. Yes, we probably will be talking about the same stuff in 5 years' time.
Well,
I've been doing speech-based radio for 20 years. I'm still talking about potholes.
I was going to say, I remember from when I first came into politics, in sort of 08, 09, these same conversations about asylum issues.
Oh, sure.
Coming up to the 2010 election. These are issues that haven't been grappled with by
They
any
will
government.
never go. Anyway,
And
we're going
it's
to get...
because of the ECHR.
OK, well, then your lot should have seen that and dealt with it, but they didn't. 0344... Well, it's true. 034... Don't look at me that. You're looking away from me because you don't want to give me eye contact because you know I'm right.
It's very hard to pull out of the ECHR. It really is, without having the entire opposition brand you as Nazis, basically. You know, we went into this after the Second World War. This is a Winston Churchill legacy.
All right.
I can write the top lines here as to why it's too difficult.
Nothing's too difficult if you're good at leadership. 0344 499 1000 to join the conversation. I want to know what Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, should be doing about the thousands of immigrants who arrive legally but overstay their welcome. She says it's going to be fining the companies and doing various things. We'll come on to some more of those details because I actually want to get your input on this because I don't think her measures, her tough words are going to work at all. 0344 499 1000. That's the telephone number. We'll take your calls and more comments and more stories next.
It was the 29th of January. It was about 11:45, and I was in this very room. I was on a Zoom call for a work thing, and in the bit of the screen where you see yourself, I suddenly saw two police officers standing behind me. I saw the high-vis yellow of their vests. I hadn't heard them enter the house, and that was the first sign I knew that something very strange was happening. So I awkwardly tried to close down the Zoom, and a few moments later, they arrested me.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
6:53 is the time. Going through the papers at the moment with Lauren McKevitt, who is a former Conservative Special Advisor. We'll come back to some more stories in just a moment. However, I must pick up some of your messages. As you know, whenever I take over the presenting role, on this particular show. I get behind with all the wonderful messages you send in. I'll try and get through as many as possible, and also your calls. And I'm asking you this morning, by the way, about what should be done about the thousands of immigrants who arrive legally but overstayed their welcome. And this is with news that Yvette Cooper, she's kind of talking tough now. 10,000 people who arrived here on work or student accommodation and various other things, they're basically staying further on after their visa runs out. And they're then claiming asylum. Yvette Cooper wants eligibility checks to stop such abuse, which will involve reviewing the finances of residents. 38,000 migrants are in hotels costing £5.5 million a day, blah, blah, blah. The thing is that I wonder whether Yvette Cooper is putting the responsibility in the wrong place, and I wonder whether this will really deal with the problem. So I want to know what you think we should do about those who overstay their welcome. 0344 499 1000. Police chiefs systematically changing their force objects so none of them can be personally held to account for failure and misuse of power, says Mick in Wallington. That, I think, with also the news. I mean, again, an astonishing story we were talking about earlier. Met smashed down door of Quaker meeting house to arrest activists. So the activists are planning some action. They're going to, I don't know, sit down in outside Parliament or something. And apparently that's worthy of breaking the door down and when they, arrest them when they've done it, surely. Anyway, Linda from Worcester, please remember what the Sussexes did to Queen Elizabeth II when they announced they were leaving the royal family. The announcement blindsided the family as they didn't let them know it was coming. They have form, says Linda. Dan from Kent says the only reason we don't take migrants back to France is it would break international law. We break international law when we sell off Russian assets to fund a war against them. Says Dan. Not sure I agree with that, Dan, but anyway. Was it really 11 and a half years ago that zany, mullet-mad ex-goonster... OK, all right, no. Let's not go down that road. Right, OK. I think I'm now caught up with all the messages, other than this one from Francis, who says, I agree with Lauren regarding the ECHR. Is anyone discussing how Northern Ireland peace would be sustained if we were to withdraw from the ECHR? No, because there's too much rhetoric associated with an emerging party without substance.
An emerging party without substance.
Yeah. Meanwhile, we've got a note from Judy on migration. Let's have a listen.
Hello, it's Judy from Altofts, West Yorkshire. Yvette Cooper will not do anything about illegal immigrants, just like the last government did nothing. What she needs to do is turn the boats back, and by that I mean just picking them up and dropping them straight back off in France. And those that have overstayed their welcome in this country need to be kicked out, but they won't. They don't deport anybody in this country. Rapists, murderers, the whole 9 yards can stay. We are the dumping ground of the world. Thank you.
Right, that's Judy on migration. I dare say, Lauren, that you've probably got something to say about whether you could actually turn the boats around and whether you can just kick people out.
I think one of the genuine, sort of the maddest moments of the last 14 years of Conservative government before the last election...
There are so many.
So many to choose from, but this one really did take the cake, was the wave machine suggestion. That they put a wave machine in the channel and just sort of push the boats back to France. There was some mad stuff that came out of the Home Office.
Who came up with that?
I think Pretty was the Home Secretary at the time, and Chris Philp was maybe the minister. I can't remember.
Now you know these people.
It was mad.
Okay, you know these people. I don't really know them.
I should stress it didn't come from the ministers. I think this came from a leak within the department. But it was a completely mad stories. And well, this is what I was talking about in relation to Simon Hart's diaries earlier in the break. Simon Hart was the chief whip in the last government, and he's written a diary. Beautifully from a Wales office perspective, the first 50% of which is actually about him being Welsh Secretary. And it's quite hard to get a book published from the Wales office. And an enormous chunk of which is...
That sounds like a fascinating read.
Is incredibly pro-shooting. But there is a great sort of vignette within this book about Simon Case coming to see him, the former head of the civil service.
Oh, yeah.
And saying, look, can you please tell your ministers to stop, and your backbenchers, to stop smacking around the civil service in public, or they will threaten to basically sort of go slow on their work. Now,
Could they go any slower?
I was fascinated by this little vignette because I was unaware that that was legal for them to do. There are legitimate grounds for criticising the work of civil servants. Backbenchers and parliamentarians are supposed to criticise the government.
Well, they are indeed. Anyway, we're going to turn our attention to some more stories, including Rachel Reeves. She sent our economy into a doom loop. We'll find out more about that and who's responsible, what's responsible, and what can be done about it, and who's speaking about it today. Plus, we continue with our conversation about Yvette Cooper. What should be done about the thousands of immigrants who arrive legally but overstay their welcome? 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number to get involved in the conversation on that. Plus, we're going to be continuing our going through the big stories of the day with Lauren. So if you want to get involved in that conversation, as I said, it's 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And a very good morning to you. It's just coming up to 3 minutes past 7 o'clock. It's Sunday the 30th of March, and this is your weekend breakfast. This Sunday morning with me, James Max, in for Dr. David Ball, with you until 10. So, still to come. Still joined by former Conservative Special Advisor Lauren McCabbott, who's going through the papers with me. We've got some more top stories to go through. And indeed, taking your responses as well. 0344 499 1000 to get involved in the conversation. Because we've been talking about one of those stories on the front pages. And indeed, I think it's going to be getting more traction during the course of the day, which is Yvette Cooper. She's been talking about some of her priorities and indeed trying to deal with the backlog or otherwise of immigration. So I'm asking you, what should be done about the thousands of immigrants who arrive legally but then they overstay their welcome. 0344 499 1000. Plus, shortly before 8, we'll be hearing from Ryan Saby, Deputy Political Editor for The Sun. And then after 8, not as in the chocolates, but, you know, after 8, former Labour MP Simon Danchuk and Paul Richards, former Labour advisor. They'll be going head-to-head, so we'll be talking through the big stories there. And Piers Pottinger will be joining me to go through the big political stories of the day. And we've got a right royal roundup, and what a day to do that with royal biographer Angela Levin. And we're going to be hearing about a new podcast from Amy Hart. She'll be talking about her Mum's Club podcast. And if that wasn't enough, I've got a 1989 Ford Escort. Nice. Yes, we'll find out about that and why it's in the news, and a bunch of old clothes. And, as I said, to all mums out there, happy Mother's Day. So, as I said, if you want to get involved in the conversation, do give me a call this morning. You can call about anything that we're discussing. So anything that Lauren or I or anybody else says, you are very welcome to join that conversation. But in particular, I want to know from you what should be done about those who arrive in this country legally but then overstay their welcome. The reason I ask is because on the front page of the Sunday Times and on the front page of the Sunday Telegraph, we've got two slightly different variants of the same story. Yvette Cooper on the front page of the Telegraph has pledged to end jobs on tap for illegal immigrants by closing loopholes in Britain's lax border laws. So far, so good. The Home Secretary has vowed to restore order to the asylum system. Yes, great. By targeting... Oh, hang on, here we go. Targeting takeaway delivery services and beauty salons that hire staff on the black market, she will announce that the rogue bosses of the gig economy firms that employ workers without a visa could face unlimited fines. So she is taking the responsibility, and as Lauren clearly pointed out, so she's putting the responsibility of basically her job on others. Now, should employers be part of the front line on this? Yes, they probably should. But are they going to do the Home Office's work for them and deal with their incompetence? No. So once again, we've got tough measures on the people who are probably law-abiding or otherwise, may or may not have made a mistake and they'll be made an example of. And yet, Yvette Cooper and her team and all the civil servants and all the infrastructure there is not doing its job. So that is why I'm asking the question. What should be done about the thousands of immigrants who arrive legally but overstay their welcome? Because 10,000 people who have arrived here on work or student visas, they've since claimed asylum. So sorry, you've been here for years on end, studying, doing whatever, and then suddenly you're claiming asylum? Well, they are. And then they get to live in taxpayer-funded hotels and other accommodation. Absolutely not. Who allowed this to take place? £5.5 million a day is what it costs. A further 65,707 are in dispersal accommodation, private dwellings, probably at our expense. We have people who are in the asylum accommodation system who arrived in the UK on student visas. Now, yeah, I get it. Like, they've arrived. How on earth this happened? Who only knows? What should be done about it? Probably not what Yvette Cooper's suggesting. 0344 499 1000 to have your say, and you tell me how we deal with those who overstay their welcome. Meanwhile, back to the papers, and as I said, Lauren McCammon is here, going through this. I've just had a bit of a rant there, Lauren. Is that all right?
That's all right.
Yeah.
Do you need another cup of coffee?
I don't think I was even offered one in the first place. But I know.
God, the service around here.
I wasn't even offered a glass of water, to be honest.
Golly.
I know, it's all right. I mean,
really, starvation rations in the building this morning.
Well, it's probably for the best because, you know, I certainly don't want to
send your blood pressure up any further?
No, I just don't want to be that presenter that just sits here troughing. And there are one or two. Oh, I've been offered a black coffee, I think, would be lovely. As would a nice glass of walk. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, let's get back to these stories. Look, it's very easy to play politics when it comes to the failure of government-run institutions. But we also, in this country, have a long history. And I do remember when Michael Gove, for all the reasons I dislike him, and his policies. One thing, when he started to say we sort of distrust experts, is because in this country we've allowed people who are experts in their field to extrapolate into the future and to think that what they say is going to happen. And it's the same with the Bank of England. Their forecasting is abominable. I would much rather use the forecasting of Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley than I would of the Bank of England, because they are better, they're better resourced, they're more intelligent, they tend to have better systems, they tend to have better analysis. The Bank of England does not have a good track record, and yet we give them credibility and credence. The OBR, you know, Liz Truss completely undermined by the fact that the OBR hadn't signed off on what she did. Now, I happen not to agree with the taxes that she and Kwasi Kwarteng said they were going to cut, because I think they were the wrong ones. But that's just my opinion. Having said that, the fact that we put so much reliance on the OBR, who have spectacularly got it wrong, they're already adjusting their figures from October because they got those wrong.
Yeah. I think there's a wider problem within how the British government works and has worked for probably about 30 years.
Is it Blair who started this with all the czars?
It's sort of. Basically, this country was always a country that was relatively introspective about government through the inquiries system. Even in the First World War, we had the inquiry into the Dardanelles campaign, the Gallipoli fiasco that happened during the war. So we've always been a nation that was introspective in some ways. As the state has evolved over the course of the intervening 100 years, it's like a machine learning. It gets better at protecting itself. And some of the ways that it's chosen to do that over the last 30 years is to create bodies outside of departments to politically isolate ministers from tough decisions.
And this is this sort of like group of quangos and various other things. And having been involved in certain quangos, I genuinely don't understand it. And I do applaud the decision to get rid of NHS England. But I think there are a range of further... I mean, for example, you go to one of the private healthcare companies and groups, and they do make a surplus, and they do make a profit, and they do run very complicated businesses very successfully. Yeah. They will have one chief executive. We have chief executives up and down the country for different authorities and different this and different that. And no, we don't pay them quite as much as the chief executive of one particular group. But then that's because... we have duplicated. If you actually looked at the overall cost of these things, by the time you've added up all those chief executives, it's fortunes. And then we've got PR departments in every single one area. And that's before you get to the fact that we don't have one NHS. We don't have a national health system in the United Kingdom. We have four. Four?
Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, England, all running their own independent health systems.
Oh.
So, yes, you're absolutely right. In England, it's a shambles because there are so many different trusts. And then you take it further and you work out that the same problem exists in Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland. It's an enormous, it's a leviathan, all of which the health secretary has been politically isolated from because of the creation of NHS England, which was the purpose of doing so, to not have to lose health secretaries every winter when a hospital had a midwifery scandal. But ministers and politicians exist to make complicated decisions on behalf of voters, and we cannot just keep isolating them from being able to make them. One of the OBR ones that you were talking about earlier...
Will Wes Streeting last the course of this Parliament?
I hope so, because I think he's very good, actually. Oh. I do. I like him enormously. I knew him vaguely when we were students, because I was trustee of the University of London Union when he was doing NUS leadership work, and I thought he was very good at the time. Okay. But if we go back to the OBR story that you were talking about earlier... One of the things that the OBR would freak out about would be the impact of changing the tax thresholds in this country.
Oh, yeah. So
and the number of people being dragged into different thresholds, which is the most politically toxic conversation to have.
It is, and we're going to come on to that in just one moment. However, as I said, I just want to talk a little bit more about Yvette Cooper and the comments that she's made about the thousands of immigrants who arrive legally but then overstay their welcome. I asked you what should happen to them. Bob! From Clacton-on-Sea. Bob, good morning.
Good morning, James.
How is Clacton-on-Sea this morning?
Well, it's very sunny. I haven't been actually stepped a toe outside the door yet, but since the clock's changed, it's put me on the hop.
Oh, I see. Would you be popping out to one of... I mean, it's sort of getting to the time of year, and I think it's next weekend that one or two of the good cafes along that little promenade will be opening. I mean, there's nowhere better to get...
I'm sure you know them. I'm sure you know them very well.
I do know them very well, Bob, and I have to say they're worth walking to. They are worth walking to. So... Lovely and sunny down in Clacton-on-Sea. What does Clacton-on-Sea make of what to do with the thousands of immigrants who arrive legally and overstay their welcome, Bob?
Well, I just spoke to your very kind producer, and look, it's quite simple to me. We have to get rid of the pull factor that's pulling people into this country. I mean,
hang on a second. I mean, they're doing everything possible. So we live in a country that the public transport doesn't work very well and is extremely expensive. We've got water systems where we just shove sewage into our rivers and lakes. We've got rubbish up and down our streets. We're not emptying the bins. We're making it extremely difficult to send and choose where you educate your child. We're taking more and more tax off you. So we're doing everything possible to make it less attractive, Bob. What else? I mean, what else do you want them to do?
You make a very difficult argument.
I mean, I know that the United Kingdom could be, and you know, in terms of its beauty. And then, by the way, I do support the idea of building more homes.
Yes.
But there are two things to it, Bob, that I wish that this government and previous governments would take account of. The first is I want a sensible and proper conversation as to why it is we have to build more homes and to understand the impact of the huge legal and illegal immigration and what it means. The second thing is I want a proper conversation about who should be responsible for housing and whether it really should end up on the taxpayer's bill, because I don't think it should. And the last point, Bob, is... And you will know, living in Clacton-on-Sea, how much housing is being built where you are. We could more creatively think about where housing is to go, and before they build it, put the right infrastructure in before you turn people's lives upside down. I genuinely don't understand that we're building on fields when we've got brownfield sites. We've got amazing sites in London that remain derelict or otherwise. We're not using the powers properly. Those areas are connected with much better transportation than areas around the country will ever have. We're building over our countryside. We're not even putting up a cohesive argument. We're saying, build, we need more houses. And we're not thinking about where they could go, how they could go, who should build them, and the fact that we've got enough planning permission in this country by developers already to build all the houses we need. So we should be asking, why aren't they building them, Bob?
Well, there's lots of different factors, but I would suggest, first of all, this government, who should be in infant school, can't find their crayons, right? Because they just haven't got a clue what to do with that. And is it other than to pander to... But
were the last lot... I mean, the reason that this lot are in power on such a low percentage is because the last lot was so appalling.
Well, they were, and I'll be the first one to say so. I mean, I
have to say, economically, if Rishi Sunak had still been in charge and Prime Minister, despite the fact that I thought Jeremy Hunt made all the wrong tax choices and decisions, I do actually think we would be in a better place than we are currently.
Well, I agree too, but obviously...
Even though I thought their performance was dismal.
I think
4 out of 10 see me.
Yes, exactly. But no, the thing is, right, going back to the issue of illegal immigration, if we just had the backbone just to say, okay, if you want them to come to this country, you're going to have to serve 2 years in military service and without weapons, by the way, before you get...
Is that really wise, Bob? I mean, I would, in like civil service, so say, for example, I would like our streets to be clean. I mean, I was watching, and I mentioned it yesterday, I was watching Michael Portillo with one of his train programmes, and he'd just been around Switzerland. I mean, you could sit down on any pavement or any road and just use that surface as a clean plate. It's so clean there. There's no rubbish, there's no debris. Whereas you look around our extraordinary city and there's debris everywhere. And people seem to think that it's acceptable to go out on a night and you buy your takeaway stuff and bits and it doesn't go in the bin.
Well, it's
and then we've got urban foxes that people are like, oh, they're so lovely, we should have a cull. We've got bins that are not emptied regularly. We've got people who drop their detritus all over the place. We don't clean our streets enough. And similarly, we don't pay enough attention to cleaning the streets and sorting out the mess, and we don't pay enough attention to stopping the people doing it in the first place, and you need to have a pincer action on both.
Well, very quickly...
Yes, Bob. Sorry, I've been ranting, haven't I?
No, it's okay. But when I was a kid...
Lauren's desperate to get in, aren't you? No, she's happy with my ranting.
When I was a kid, we moved out of East London to Harlow in Essex.
Yes.
Okay. And one of the conditions that we had a new council house, because it was a new town back in 1959, wherever it was.
Oh my God, that's before I was born, Bob.
Well, there you are. But you had to even paint your doorstep. You could not put a disused fridge outside your front door, for instance. But it's just standards have just been allowed to. Well, they've just been abandoned. There is no. I mean, I live in actually Jaywick, which is just outside of Clacton, as you know, and the community atmosphere there is brilliant, but there are parts of it where people just flight it, and it's just abominable.
Aren't they about to spend quite a lot of money in Jaywick?
You are.
Aren't they?
Great.
No, not me.
All right.
Aren't they? Yes, in the government. Even if I were to come down and use one of your lovely cafes or visit the beach or anything else, Bob, or walk the dog, I don't think my spending would make much difference to the local economy. I was talking about the national government. I thought they were going to do some investment.
Come and hear me sing, because I sing in pubs around here. So.
Which is your pub of choice in?
Well, the 3Js. I sing there, and the Broadway Club. I'm doing a gig there this afternoon, and the Never Say Die, and other places like that. So I'm just plugging myself.
No, you do that, Bob. Tracy's been in touch with some criticism for me. So, Bob, and I want you to be the arbiter of this.
Yes.
Tracy has said Bob from Essex is trying to talk, and you keep talking over him, James. Is that fair?
No. It's your show, James, and I really have missed you. I used to get up early morning, to watch you, and I'm really keen on your points of view, because I share most of them. No, I've got no problem with that at all.
Okay, well, I just wanted to, make sure that Tracy had her say, but also you had the ability to judge and critique as well. I suppose, Bob, part of it is because I haven't been on for a bit. I've got quite a lot to say. I've got pent-up demand.
Well, so have I.
However, you can call in any time, Bob. Anyway, thank you very much indeed for your call. Good to chat. That's Bob in Clacton on Sea on Essex. There we go. I mean, Bob had plenty to say. I probably had a bit more.
Slightly.
Yeah.
Moderately.
Is that problematic?
I think it's your show. You get to do what you want.
Yeah, you say that. Don't really. Let's talk about this then. Let's talk about Rachel Reeves. So, Tory leader sticks in the boot to Kemi. So this Kemi Badenoch, she's sticking the boot into Labour over the economy, and I think this is, a potential area of strength. What disappoints me though about what Kemi is saying, because I think on one hand I agree, we can all stick it to Rachel Reeves. We can all say, the choices that you've made on national insurance are problematic for creating new work and creating incentives. The decisions that you've taken over the tax thresholds are hugely punitive, even if you hadn't changed the upper ones. So my view would be, don't change the upper ones if you can't afford to do it. I get it. More people, people at the top end should continue to pay, etc., but deal with the lower end.
There is what's interesting, if you look at the sort of the chart of the thresholds and how much people are paying and how many people pay each threshold, there's this enormous spike just before £100,000 of income, and it's because as soon as you hit £100,000, you lose personal allowance, you lose
which
access.
I think, and that was was that an Osborne thing?
There's this enormous. It's a cumulative problem over the course of the last 20 years.
But they should never have done that.
Failing to move the threshold and creating these massive cliff edges.
No. But they should forget the cliff edge, because I wouldn't have a problem with the thresholds maybe not necessarily rising as fast or otherwise, but that is very punitive, and it causes problems at certain levels, particularly for London-based companies. I know it's a London problem, and I know you might say, if you're earning that amount of money...
It's not just a London problem. Think about every sort of consultant doctor around the country. Yeah. They're being paid up towards that. Many of them will not take more shifts, will not do more work in order to avoid hitting that £100,000 mark,
because they lose their net effective tax
as soon as it goes over the top. So it's a cap on productivity in the country.
It is, but you see... because of the way that our political narrative works and the financial illiteracy in our nation, it means that you can't have that conversation, because it just suddenly says, oh well, you're giving tax cuts to the to the rich. It's not a tax cut per se, because next year you're just saying, I want to take a different amount from people because I want to incentivize them in a different way. We need to change that narrative. Kemi hasn't done that because she hasn't talked about what she would do instead.
Exactly, and the problem here is, opposition is really hard.
Sure.
Your worst day in government is still better than your best day in opposition. And it is really difficult to put forward ideas when your parties have really only just come out of government. There's a long way back to trust between the Conservative Party and the electorate.
But there is one thing that, for example, if you have a look at what Reform have done, there are probably lots of policies that haven't been discussed, haven't even been formulated, no idea. But one thing they have done is they've absolutely resonated with the point that you've been talking about, which the Conservatives should have owned. And they should have talked about when do you start paying tax, and they never did.
Yeah.
Reform has said 20k. Simple. It's so simple.
Well, we raised the personal allowance consistently over the course of 14 years, but substantially from where it was when we came in.
But you know what I'm going to say to that?
But we didn't do enough to get it high enough to make it worthwhile.
But you did some own goals. So, first of all, the own goal was this cliff edge thing that you talk about, where you took away people's personal allowance. You should either have a personal allowance or not.
Yeah.
Everybody should get it. The second thing is, because you were kind of salami slicing, the second thing is that you started to muck around with bits of tax here so that people sort of like didn't see. And then you had Gove's discussions about, council tax, which I think have been, mucked around. And in fact, we've got this whole conversation, which we'll come on to in a minute, because I want to get your take on the speculation that Rachel Reeves is not going to have enough money, and therefore what else can she do?
Yeah.
I mean, I have some very simple answers as to things I think she could do, but I want to get your take on some of that sort of nefarious stuff that is going on. Meanwhile, if you want to join the conversation, you can do so. So, we've been talking about Yvette Cooper, what should be done about the thousands of immigrants who arrive legally but overstay their welcome, and of course, anything that we are discussing elsewhere, you are very welcome to join. 0344 499 1000, and we take more of your calls and comments next on Talk.
It was the 29th of January. It was about 11:45, and I was in this very room. I was on a Zoom call for a work thing, and in the bit of the screen where you see yourself, I suddenly saw two police officers standing behind me. I saw the high-vis yellow of their vests. I hadn't heard them enter the house, and that was the first sign I knew that something very strange was happening. So I awkwardly tried to close down the Zoom, and a few moments later they arrested me.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is talk.
7:28 is the time. Very good morning. It's me, James Max, with you till 10 here on Talk. The reason immigrants love this country, says Nicholas in Yorkshire, is the fact it's becoming such a something hole. It reminds them of home. Oh, Nicholas. Meanwhile, I've had one or two... I think John in Bristol has sent actually a bunch of messages. So John is trying to monopolise the text machine, but he says, James Max, asked it again, does he get paid by the word? John, I wish I did.
Well, how many words has he sent in?
I don't know. Well, I think he sent another one. And then somebody's accused me and says, James, the first presenter to be more boring than his guests. Well, I mean...
Does that say good things about me or bad things about you?
I think it says bad things about me, but I think that's probably good. I mean, I'm delighted that my guests are interesting, because otherwise we haven't done our job.
Well, I'm delighted to be on, so thank you very much.
Well, then there we go. Right, well, I'm so sorry if you're not happy. If you're not happy, just give me a call. But if you are happy, I do want to hear from you this morning, though, Yvette Cooper, because I'm not very happy about what she's said. Because she's given all this, like, hard talk about migrants and asylum and various other things. And then you realise that, in fact, she's putting the onus on shopkeepers and on small business owners and not on the government. And so she's trying to distract away from the fact that this whole mess comes from disorganisation at government level. So I'm asking you, what should be done about the thousands of immigrants who arrive legally but overstay their welcome? 0344 499 1000. Meanwhile, so we've got Kemi talking about things, and I do understand the difficulty of being in opposition, but I also... financial illiteracy in this country is just horrendous. And you said some interesting things to me whilst we were listening to some travel news or otherwise. There is this assumption in this country, which you correctly point out, which is that people think that national insurance goes to pay for the NHS.
Yeah.
And it doesn't. It
doesn't. And it's because it has the word insurance in it, and there is a global conversation about how insurance with medical systems work. Frankly, the terror that is instilled by the American system, which can cost so much money, is incredibly complicated. It rejects enormous amounts of things for people. So there is this concept that the word insurance means, oh, that must be my insurance payment towards the NHS, and it simply isn't.
And this is the point that I wish people could or would understand, is that when they say rich people should pay more, of course they should. If you have a percentage-based system, then they will. We not only have a percentage-based system, which means that the more you earn, the more you pay, we also have a progressive system, which means the more you earn, the more you pay, the more you earn, the higher percentage you pay.
Yes.
Which means it's a kind of double whammy. And then the more you spend, the more you pay, where you live. We've got this whole AI discussion about revaluation of assets.
Yes.
So I think it's kind of interesting that people are beginning to pick up ways in which Rachel Reeves might find other ways to raise more money. And it will shock people that the council tax system hasn't really been reviewed since it was first put in place. And we're working off 1991 valuations of houses and properties.
So it's really important to understand that in relation to this story, we are not talking about England. We're talking about Wales, which has elected to revalue more recently, and so has more up-to-date information, because council tax and local government is devolved in Wales and has been since the beginning of the devolution settlement.
And quite often nasty things start in Wales and then move over here because people think, oh, that's a good idea.
They do bleed across within the Labour Party, and Labour have been in charge of Wales for 25 years, over 25 years now.
I mean, that should tell you everything you need to know about Labour being in charge.
Apparently, 20% of primary school leavers moving into secondary school are functionally illiterate in Wales. The Welsh education system has been run by the Labour Party for a quarter of a century.
And this is the party that ideologically, and it is quite interesting because I think there's an interesting bit in one of the papers that talks about Rachel Reeves and her sister. And her sister was given an option, I think, on a question on a podcast. If there were no financial implications or otherwise, what would you do? And she said, I'd eliminate private schools.
Yes.
Which I've consistently said that the VAT on private schools is an ideological move.
Yes.
And the way, if you ideologically dislike private and fee-paying schools, improve the state system so they're not necessary and people don't choose them, and people won't. But the thing is that the state system, too woke in its agenda in terms of what they're teaching. Class sizes are too big, not well resourced enough, not good enough for music or arts.
Schools
or
are crumbling.
Things. Schools are crumbling. Although, having said that, I went to a fee-paying school that was crumbling. I mean, it doesn't really matter. The quality of teaching matters.
Well, a lot of the schools crumbling stuff is to do with the concrete issue, the lifetime concrete in these schools that is now collapsing and was not replaced over the course of 20 years when it should have been. No, so this AI revaluation in Wales, it's really important to understand that Wales is able to do this because they revalued slightly more recently than we did. In England, there has been no revaluation of property since 1991. Now, I want you to think, all of your listeners, all of your viewers, how much has your property changed in value between 1991 and now?
But then the question is, the reason that it hasn't been valued, and adequately it might be answered, is that first of all, it's very toxic, and the second thing is, you are dealing with relative values. So if a council tax band, you know, a house is in D and one's in C and one's in F or whatever it is, you're talking about the relative values between properties is probably largely consistent. So if a house was the most expensive in the village back in 1991, it probably still is today.
Except the relative values may well have altered because of new building that has gone on around the area. And has inserted new variables into what needs to be assessed. And also, working from home, for example, that you might all end up in higher bands because, you know, there's been a whole influx of people because suddenly, if you're only going into London 3 days a week and not 5, you can have a slightly longer commute. Anyway, I don't think that we need to be too afraid of using AI for things like this, but I think it is really important to remember with this article that this is a Welsh issue and not an England issue.
Right. Well, you say that. Anyway,
aren't you glad you have a Welsh constitutional specialist on this early on a Sunday morning?
Yeah, no, really. Honestly, absolutely. It was, in fact, it was on my list of things.
I knew it was. We don't get out much and we're terrible at parties, but we do have our uses.
OK. Oh, I'm quite good at parties. Anyway, we'll get some more stories from you. Plus, after the break, I'm going to be joined live in the studio by Ryan Sadie, Deputy Political Editor for The Sun. He's going to be discussing some of the big stories. Oh, I think he's joining us down the line. Anyway, either way. We'll be speaking to Ryan. He'll be talking to us about the big stories from The Sun and indeed getting involved in some of your calls as well. So if you want to give me a call, it's what should be done about the thousands of immigrants who arrive legally and then overstayed their welcome. Yvette Cooper's come up with some ideas. I don't think they're good enough, so I think you can do better. 0344 499 1000, your calls, and indeed Ryan, next on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
7:37 is the time. Very good morning. It is me, James Max, with you till 10 here on Talk. And until 8, going to be joined by Lauren McEffert. She is former Conservative Special Advisor. We'll be getting some more stories from her and indeed going through your comments, which have been coming in thick and fast. Some thick, some fast. 87222. Start your text with the word talk. And indeed, if you want to X me, you can do so at talkTV. I've been let out of my cage today, so if you want to get involved in the conversation. Plus, if you want to give me a call, I want to hear from you, because Yvette Cooper, she's come up with all these great ideas, and then you start to examine them, you realise that it's just bobbins. It's rhetoric without action. So, what should be done about the thousands of immigrants who arrive legally but outstay their welcome? You give me a call, 0344 499 1000. That's the telephone number. Meanwhile, joined now by Ryan Sadie, Deputy Political Editor for The Sun, who joins me to discuss some of the big stories from that very paper. Ryan, very good morning to you.
Good morning, James.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us here on Talk. So, what a banger of a front page story you have. MPs dog on expenses. You couldn't make it up. I love the headline. It's an exclusive. This is, though, somewhat serious. Perhaps you can explain a little bit more about it and why we, the tax-paying public, should be concerned.
Well, I think the main reason is the fact that the whole MPs' expenses system seems to be geared up towards letting MPs have two homes. That's one in their constituency and then one in London. Now, that's if they live far enough away from London that they get that allowance. Now, the thing is here that one of the expenses that is allowed is the fact that an MP can give pet rent. They can get pet rent as part of that allowance. And this MP, the Labour MP, Taiwo Owatemi, managed to claim £900 for her pet rent for her cockapoo, Bella. Now, this, believe it or not, is completely within the rules. So she has done absolutely nothing wrong. So who should we blame? Should we blame the MP? Should we blame the whole system? But the fact that she has claimed £900 for a pet, for the pet's rent, just shows you that the system probably needs looking at.
Can I ask you a question, though, Ryan, and maybe, Lauren can involve herself in this. We've probably got a very expensive system which is there to deal with MPs and their expenses. What I don't understand is, if you have a job that requires you to have a second home or to travel or whatever it is, you will have an expense system that allows you to claim the expenses that you need to claim, and you will have valid rules around it that either classes them as expensable or not. And then you will get an allowance, or you'll be paid a salary or something, and you could just have an amount. We have this huge infrastructure which is extremely expensive. Just give them an amount of money and saying, here's the deal, make it work or don't make it work, it's up to you. Instead, we have this huge and complicated expenses system, which kind of arrived when Margaret Thatcher didn't want to give MPs a pay rise because she didn't want the optics of actually paying our MPs a proper amount of money. Why don't we just fire all these people, save the infrastructure, save the money, and say, here's the allowance, live within or don't, and if you manage to scrimp and save and make a bit extra, so be it, and if you live beyond your means, live beyond your means. Why don't we do that, Ryan?
Yeah, I think one of the issues is, as you say, this whole system has got out of control. We go back to the expenses scandal from 15 years ago.
Oh, I mean, who wouldn't want a duck house? Oh, lovely. It was a gift that kept on giving.
The moat cleaning.
The moat cleaning.
Exactly. And even though this fits within the current rules, you've got to be asking yourself the question, are the rules actually working? So I think the issue is MPs' pay has gone up yet again. That was approved by MPs this week. Are we paying them a good enough salary? And it's now around £90,000 a year or just over. There's issues such as pet rent. Should that be coming out of the salary and not even be covered by the sort of vast expenses of business cost expenses.
Exactly, because I have dogs and I have to pay my way, as I dare say many listening to us now and watching us now up and down the country. If you're listening and watching, I dare say you pay for your pets. Don't find a way that you can claim for your expenses. Lauren, when it comes to this, is the system broken? I mean, have we just got a system that's just out of control?
It is, and I've just worked out the only way to address the tax thresholds is for MPs to vote themselves a pay rise that takes them to £101,000 a year and put themselves into that enormous threshold bullpen.
Where they will lose their benefits.
Where they'll lose their benefits.
And they'll have an effective tax rate of 60%.
So they are all currently just under the threshold. And I think the only way we address this is the point at which politicians end up being paid within that bracket.
Ron, let me ask you about the story, which I think is going to run and run. And I know that there's a sort of like a sort of vignette in The Sun on Sunday today, which we can talk about in a moment. However, sister paper, Sunday Times, they talk about migrants seeking asylum after their visas expire. We've got some quite strong words, if you like, from Yvette Cooper. But once again, to me, it seems as if we've got strong words and no action. So she's putting the responsibility of sorting out the people who arrive and then overstay their welcome onto others. She's saying, they mustn't stay and we've got to check and we've got to root them out from all these jobs that they're doing. But then there seems to be nothing to be done when they are found. It's like, what do? You find the person who employed them as opposed to actually kicking the person out. And then, of course, we had this rhetoric, we're going to smash the gangs. How much do the gangs, according to The Sun on Sunday, the boat smugglers, how much do they make a year?
Well, one of my colleagues has actually done the maths on this, and it's around £200 million a year. Now, they're working that out on the basis that it seems that every time you come across the channel, every time that one of these migrants is paying for a journey, it's £12,000 per go. So it's absolutely staggering. And these numbers are just getting, effectively, it seems like they're getting worse and worse.
Can you just repeat the number? So just because I think people may have lost an hour of their sleep and they're just sort of waking up or something and haven't quite realised. So let's just have the number or amount of money that they... Sorry, my producer's got his head in his hands because I can't get my words out. I want the amount of money that they're making overall and how much each asylum seeker pays to get across the channel, just so that we can put it in context.
Yeah. So the gangs overall, the smuggling gangs are getting a total of £200 million.
£200 million. Okay.
Now this is worked out on the basis of every single migrant who crosses the channel is paying £12,000 for that journey. Which is staggering.
£12,000. You're right.
And just to clarify, this is only the channel section of that crossing, right? This doesn't include getting across Europe, getting across the Mediterranean. The organised crime involved here is enormous.
And what I don't understand is, if you don't pay a parking ticket, they'll certainly find you. And they'll certainly find you and fine you, and you'll be in trouble. Complain about your local school, you'll get the knock on the door of the local conspiracy. But if you nick something under 200 quid, up until now, they keep saying they're going to do something about it, but I haven't noticed. Or if 200 million quid, you would have thought that they would find it. Ryan, is this political incompetence? Is it that it's just impossible and the organised crime is so effective? What is it that is not working that is allowing this to take place?
I think I've heard this from several Home Secretaries over recent years, particularly since 2018, when it seemed like channel crossings were actually coming to the fore, and they're actually happening more than those. Remember when migrants used to travel across in those lorries? Now the issue is there is not one thing that is going to stop this. So Keir Starmer can talk about smashing the gangs. He can talk about intercepting those individual boats, trying to speak to China and factories there, and how they're actually going to stop the physical boats from being made. There was things like the deterrent was got rid of. I think if you have all these things thrown together, you may have half a chance of actually trying to combat this. And this is why Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper are hosting 40 countries tomorrow to try and tackle the issue of migration, because all these countries know it's costing them a lot of money and it's having a massive strain on public services.
Am I being unfair when I say to the likes of Yvette Cooper that yes, we've got strong rhetoric, but in fact I'm somewhat sceptical as to whether the measures she's talking about are going to be effective?
I think you're being fair, because one of the crackdowns that she's talking about today is following the money, trying to crack down on people trying to, when they get jobs, there's efficient checks in there. Now, I think I've heard lots of Home Secretaries over the years say that. So I think matching the rhetoric with the reality
clear to the police that they have our full backing.
She's been in there 9 months. I think people are now
possible
perhaps losing patience
a
little bit with the government in terms of actually trying to crack on and get on with things. So
they said they were going to smash the gangs. They haven't. They removed the measures that the Conservatives put in place, whether you like them or not. The boats, to house migrants in, and then so back to the hotels it is. And then we've also seen numbers
We're
continue.
clear right
I
across
guess
the government,
if
the
and
Prime
when
Minister,
we
the
see
Deputy
net
Prime Minister,
migration
the Lord
figures when it's next
Chancellor,
announced,
for
if
me
they
as
haven't
Home
gone
Secretary.
down substantially, then I think this government is going to be in trouble.
They will be. Now, on the plus side for this government, I think the numbers will come down quite a lot in the coming years or so. I think big things like obviously we had a lot of people in from Ukraine, Hong Kong, and I think those numbers will be taken out of the system. But as you're right, if we can't have numbers up until June last year, in that year to June last year, we had 900,000 people coming to this net numbers coming to this country. So they're absolutely staggering. I mean, that's another city every single year. So that's why they need to crack down, and that's why we need to train up homegrown workers to do a lot of the jobs in this country rather than letting people from overseas do them. Now, there's no problem with you have to have some legal migration, but we do have to train up the people here to do the jobs ourselves.
Almost in a word, it's unfair to ask, but Kemi Badenoch, she's listed in your paper and she's doing some interviews and bits and pieces. Effective or not?
Look, I think she's had a very, very difficult first few months since November when she came in. However, I think she's got a bit of an opportunity this week. This is a week when so many bills come in for Brits up and down the country, whether it's council tax, whether businesses pay for those hikes in national insurance. This is the moment where she can say Rachel Reeves' spring statement, her budget isn't quite working. So there is an opportunity for her to make hay this week, but it's been really, really difficult for her.
It has been, and despite the fact there is an open goal, it would appear as if she's unable to kick a ball. There we go. Ryan Sadie, Deputy Political Editor for The Sun. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning here on Talk. Right, we will be getting some more stories from Lauren. That's coming up next on Talk.
she contradicted herself. She said it'll never be allowed to happen under a Labour government. So we brought forward proposals to legislate. She said, oh, no, leave it with me. But I can assure the nation 100% that I'm on the side of fighting two-tier justice, and it will never happen under a Labour council. Well, guess what? It's about under a Labour government.
But wasn't she right, Graham, to at least... Wasn't she right?
She was, when we raised it.
But wasn't she right? But wasn't she right to just say, actually, let's give this a go. Let's try to reason with these people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
7:53 is the time. If it's true, some news that may be breaking is absolutely astonishing, but I can't share it just yet. All I can say is that if it is true, I will share it a little bit later on. I mean, it's not necessarily breaking, but I'll tell you, even Lauren, you will fall off your chair when you hear it. Okay. But I can't say anything just yet.
Is it going to break before I leave?
I suspect not.
Oh.
It's just rumours.
Oh.
It's just rumours. Anyway, let's get back to discussing the stories today, because it's kind of a sort of veritable feast. And the thing is, I suppose, because stories come back again and again, it can get tiring to talk about immigration and immigrants. It can get tiring to talk about the small boats. If somebody says to you, and they do regularly to me, they go, it's because of Brexit. There have been so few negatives as a result of Brexit. And now, I have to say, I don't think the last government used what they could or should have done in terms of executing it and getting it done. But I think all the doom and gloom about it was just a nonsense. But there is this narrative, particularly amongst the younger people, well, it didn't work, so we should go back in.
So we're talking about, immigration numbers have gone up because of Brexit, apparently. Is that what you're saying? No, immigration numbers have gone up because middle-income status has been reached in larger parts of the world.
No, this is more about economic performance. That some people say, well, look at our economy, it's a mess. We've stagnated because because of Brexit. It's just like, no, it doesn't make a...
I don't think we've stagnated because of Brexit. I think we've stagnated because of economic decisions domestically. We can't pass the buck from politicians in this country.
Fair enough.
But I also don't think the immigration issue is anything related. The big problem that we have is a problem that's been coming for 20 years, which is that more countries around the world, developing countries around the world, have reached middle-income status, meaning that more and more people have the money to pay a people smuggler to begin with. And 30 years ago, that just wasn't the case.
Very true. Dale says, James Max Clarkson. Wow. I wonder when they're going to bring back the window tax. I've got loads of bricks which are ready. Stephen Cambridge, the police need to concentrate on keeping our streets and businesses safe, not hurty words and DIE rubbish.
Well, and safe from Quakers.
And safe Quakers. The immigrants that come by boat should be turned back or put in camps and not allowed to be free. Good morning, James. Dave says, you're totally right about government ministers now delegating their responsibilities to quangos and other non-elected bodies, which allows them to concentrate on the two things which seem to drive their activities, optics and votes. This allows them to ignore the majority and the good of the country. The situation means they can avoid taking tough decisions which may make them unpopular amongst certain groups that they see as their electoral support.
That is absolutely correct.
So, David, in South Gloucestershire, you're absolutely onto something.
More South Gloucestershire. All the best opinions come from Gloucestershire, I'm telling you.
Strong, tough decisions are needed, but few politicians currently have the courage to take them. There we go. Dave in Portsmouth says, James, it's good to have you back. We've missed your early morning shows. Yeah, I sort of miss them in a funny sort of way. Stopping migrants and overstayers is easy. Any people given leave to remain without proper identification of who they are and their background, or remain after their visa expires if they commit serious crime, charge the Home Office individuals personally who have not undertaken the correct due diligence. See how many unknowns Whitehall staff want to let in if they were to be personally charged.
Golly.
Dave in Lancaster or Portsmouth or wherever you are, maybe it's Dave Lancaster in Portsmouth. Interesting. It's the sort of thing that you can text but not do.
Yes.
Okay. It's in that category. Good to have you back, says Danny. For those objecting you're talking too much, what they don't understand, it's your programme. It's called Talk Radio.
Yeah,
okay, well, that's that.
There is a Ron Seal argument there. It does what it says on the tin.
I would hope so.
No, exactly.
I mean, sometimes we talk sport, but that's another matter. Anyway, Michael, James, good morning. You could revalue all houses, but all house prices have gone up. The relative values of all houses have gone up together. Show me a house that I can buy for 50k, 30k. I wonder if we'll end up getting a new window tax or even a guardian patio tax. I was writing about all sorts of taxes that they could come up with. Tax if you've got a walk-in wardrobe. Tax if you've got a soft closing lavatory seat. That's what they come after next.
So now that I live in the new build, I can tell you that they are not putting enough closets in anything that they're building now. So
well,
that would only really affect older houses, unfortunately.
I would hope they've got cupboards, not closets. We're not in America.
My mother's American.
Maureen says council tax should pay for basic services, rubbish collection, street cleaning and lighting. What has the value of one's property got to do with that?
I think it was, again, a progressive taxation effort to say, well, if you're in a bigger house, you must be richer, you must pay more. But I agree that councils need to get better at providing and paying for services.
It goes back to that point which Margaret Thatcher wanted to introduce, which was basically in the poll tax, basically saying an individual should pay tax. I mean, we should probably just have a local income tax and just say, look, regardless of who you are, have a tax, have a local income tax. Anyway, meanwhile, just a very quick question that I can ask you in my last 30 seconds. Do you have an item of clothing in your wardrobe which is more than 20 years old?
I'm 38, so
no.
Yes, yes. I kept my sixth form leavers ball dress.
OK, we're a nation of fashion hoarders, according to this article. Many keeping clothes for 30 years. Almost a quarter of us have items hung in wardrobes for more than 20 years.
I've got some very old scarves.
OK, well then, that's a great old line there. And on that bombshell, we will leave it. After break, we're going to head to our head-to-head panel, which will have Simon Danchuk and former Labour advisor Paul Richards in the studio. My thanks to Lauren McCavitt. Thank you very much indeed for that. And, of course, the phone lines are open for your calls. 0344 499 1000. Listening to Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you. It's just coming up to 3 minutes past 8 o'clock. It's Sunday, the 30th of March. Mother's Day, by the way. It's me, James Max, with you until 10, in for Dr. David Bull. Still to come, going to be joined very shortly in the studio by former Labour MP Simon Denchuk and also Paul Richards, former Labour advisor. They'll be going head-to-head with the big stories. Also, Piers Pottinger will be joining us to go through the big political stories of the day. We will have a right royal roundup with the biographer Angela Levin, and what a day to do so, as Prince Harry, once again, front pages of a number of the papers, as we find out exactly what he's been accused of by the chair of the charity that he walked away from. Also, we're going to be hearing about a new podcast from Amy Hart. She'll be talking to us about the Mums Club podcast. And if that wasn't enough, we'll find out about a 1989 Ford Escort that's worth a fortune. You'll find out why. Also this morning, talking to you about Yvette Cooper. She's probably going to be on all the news stories. Suddenly she's broken cover after 2 months of absence. I wonder if she's made any progress on stopping those gangs and breaking them up. Oh, according to The Sun, not so much. £200 million is what they rake in every year from their illegal activities. But also, she's going to be talking about the various different forms of illegal migration and immigration and what she's doing about it. But one of the things she seems to be doing is putting all the onus on employers as opposed to taking responsibility by her department and herself for dealing with it. So what should be done about the thousands of immigrants who arrive legally but then overstay their welcome? Give me a call. It's 0344 499 1000. So, of course, you can join the conversation on any of those points. You can send me a text, 87222. Start your text with the word talk. And you can X me at talkTV, at the James Max. Be very happy to hear from you. Not only about that, but also any of the stories that we talk about during the course of the show. Feel free to join that conversation. You are most welcome. Talking of most welcome, joining me live in the studio, former Labour MP Simon Denchuk, and indeed former Labour advisor Paul Richards. Very good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Morning. Thank you very much for coming in. Now, people might think it's a bit odd that we got a former Labour MP and a former Labour advisor. But Simon Denchuk, I mean, your politics is somewhat different now.
Yeah, I've been on something of a journey, it's fair to say. I'm now a member of Reform UK, and for good reasons, in my view. The country needs sorting out quite radically, and I think Reform are the best party to do it.
Right, OK, well, we're trying
Well, I'm still Labour, I should point out, so we have some difference there between us.
Yeah, well, indeed.
We're going to see.
Yeah. So, two-tier sentencing council. Let's talk about this story, because we have seen this story, and it's actually one of the few occasions where I would agree with both the Prime Minister and indeed some of his ministers who talk about this idea that if you are from a different economic or socio-economic background, or indeed ethnic background or religious background, then somehow your sentencing might be different or taken into account. It does come across as two-tier sentencing. They don't like it. The Conservatives don't like it. The public don't seem to like it, but the judges do. What do we do about it? Paul, maybe I'll start with you.
Well, the Sentencing Council is a quango, so it's unelected, it's appointed. It was something set up in the actual previous Labour government. It's supposed to give guidance on how sentencing should work. This has fallen absolutely on the wrong side of a common sense test, which is why Shabana Mahmood has said she's going to have no truck with it.
Should we abolish the Sentencing Council?
Well, that is one of the things in play, actually.
Yeah, good.
I think, if we can abolish NHS England, the biggest quango, then why not this little one? And if it's standing in the way of common sense justice, then why not?
OK, good idea. Simon, would you support getting rid of it?
Absolutely, abolish it. I mean, there's no purpose to it. These are decisions that should be made by ministers. That's what we elect them for. I'd scrap a whole lot of quangos, actually.
Well, let's have another one that you would get rid of.
Oh, well, that's a good question. They're getting rid of NHS England. I think that's the right move. But there's a whole range of Ofcom and Ofgem and regulators.
Do you not think that we should have an Ofcom?
Well, I think there should be some regulation, but I think why can't it be done by civil servants? Why can't it be done by
Have you seen how
ministers?
useless they are?
Civil servants and ministers? Well,
Yes, utterly useless, incompetent.
But they are elected. That's what's important. And the public want good politicians to do what they have elected them for.
There's a bit of an industry, isn't there?
Absolutely.
And it's also a revolving chair of people sort of chairing them and being on them and getting paid their expenses. You know, it is a bit of a cottage industry of regulation. And I think there's an argument for slimming it down. I wouldn't get rid of it completely. There are things that need regulating, but
is it time that we got rid of the OBR?
Oh, I think we should actually. I think what purpose does it serve? And it's been unhelpful for Rachel Reeves quite clearly.
Very unhelpful, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't abolish it though. I would say that it needs to perhaps not to be listened to. You know, it's one voice amongst many, and a good minister will listen to a plurality of advice, but then make their mind up.
But you see, part of the problem is that they didn't put in all the right numbers in order to come up with their analysis. And this is the thing that we have these bodies. So, for example, the OBR or even the Bank of England, their forecasting is woefully bad.
Yeah, well, economists, you know, they're not godlike figures. They will make mistakes. They will disagree with each other, and they get it wrong. You know.
And I'm reminded that I should say that the OBR is the Office for Budget Responsibility.
Indeed, it is.
And I should, explain.
But they're not infallible, you know. And this is, I mean, Simon's right. You do ministers
serve. I mean, there's plenty. You know, we can hold them to account. There are plenty of think tanks that are independent that do scrutinise government and the Chancellor. Why do we need a government, a taxpayer-funded think tank to tell us what's happening?
Well, I suppose part of the problem is that because of financial illiteracy, whether at government level or other levels, that the story behind it was that these things are so complicated that we must have somebody who's got access to all the data and all the numbers and is able to verify what the government minister or ministers are saying and to also talk about the potential impacts of certain moves and to say that they're funding. And part of that is to deal with international markets that will take fright at certain big changes, as we saw. We saw it with Liz Truss. She didn't manage the process properly. She got absolutely, mullered by it. And I have to say that Rachel Reeves, it seems as if she wasn't listening to the advice that she was given, on the basis that she put in all these measures. She kept telling everybody that she was going to grow the economy. The numbers and the advice told her that it wasn't, and we've ended up raising a whole load of new tax that's just simply going to pay extra interest on the money that we borrowed.
The OBR, it's just like the Sentencing Council. These are created for political reasons, really, to create some distance between the government minister making effective decisions and taking the politics out of it. That's why they're often created, but they don't serve any real purpose. We need to get back to government being done by elected officials.
OK, how's Rachel Reeves doing? Let's start with you, Paul.
Well, I think she's doing well in the circumstances and the hand with which she was dealt. I think she's taken some quite tough decisions that aren't for political expediency, but are about the long-term health of the economy. I think she should be judged not on the first few months, but on the first few years, because it's a plan for growth that's going to take 4 or 5 years. And after the massive, you just mentioned the Liz Truss debacle, but 14 years actually of underinvestment, she's doing a good job, and she's there. And she's there till the next election, by the way.
Well,
she's not going anywhere.
Well, she will be after that election, I can tell you.
Some wishful thinking on your part there.
Political expediency. How do you countenance that with some decisions which are clearly ideologically driven?
Well, like what? What's ideological about
VAT on school fees is ideologically
No,
driven.
it isn't. It's about raising money. It is. It's about putting money into the state school.
Money.
It's about putting money into the state school sector, which is
absolute nonsense. You and I know that's nonsense.
I mean, fairness is not an ideology. It's just a guiding value, and that's what Labour's doing.
She's been an absolute disaster for the economy. She's borrowing billions to pay train drivers, junior doctors. That's what we're borrowing money for. She's taught the economy down.
Then junior doctors deserve a pay rise.
Let me say. She's taught the economy down disastrously. She's killed confidence. She's taxing business to the point where they won't employ people. And we have and this is a really important point. She's saying, oh, well, now we've got Donald Trump coming in, putting tariffs on us. Now, the problem there is that we've got a cabinet stuffed full of people who've criticised Donald Trump for the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years, and then we expect him to take into account the special relationship. They've been exceptionally nasty with him, and then we expect him to do Britain a favour.
Let's separate.
But that's a really important point.
But let's separate.
Hang
on a second. But let's separate the Trump issue because I think that's something that everybody's having to deal with, compared to the decisions that Rachel Reeves has made. Because too often I hear, well, she was dealt a terrible hand. And
you're not denying that, are you? I mean, it was a pretty rough thing to come into, and then
it was. But half of that black hole she talked about was of her own making. And the second thing is that she has taken decisions herself which are either ideological, and I don't care what you say. VAT on school fees, it will not produce any money. It's ideological. It's even in the papers.
They're not charities, though, are they? They are businesses.
Well, they are charities, and this is the point: is that they will no longer do the things that they were going to do. If you want to abolish private schools, no. If you want to, it doesn't matter. If you want to, education is not a business. It has never been taxed at any stage.
But these are businesses.
So, are you going to put VAT on all the universities then?
Well, that's a whole other question.
No,
how
you can't have one rule. So it just demonstrates how ideological you've been. Anyway, forget that. It's a small point. The bigger point is, if you want to grow the economy, you have to employ people. National insurance isn't about putting more money in the NHS or anything else. It's just tax. So she's shoved up tax.
Why do you say that? Because actually it is about putting money into the National Health Service.
No, it's not. It's tax.
The waiting lists are actually going down month on month as a result of this investment. The NHS is finally being turned around. That's one benefit of doing it.
That's because the doctors stopped striking because she threw a whole load of money at them, which I agree needed to be done. I didn't agree with the last government and how they dealt with it. But the fact is that we've got smoke and mirrors. We've got somebody who's telling us that they're growing the economy. She hasn't got a clue how to grow the economy. She has not put in one single measure that will add a single percentage point. And this whole nonsense about 1.5 million homes and understanding the planning system, they don't understand the planning system. They don't understand real estate. They haven't consulted with anybody in the property industry.
Well, this is a big point.
The tax issues, the tax that they haven't put in. Seriously, we are being governed by a bunch of incompetents.
We have a Labour government that don't understand business. That's the reality of it. And I've been in business for many years previously, before politics, but I was an exception in Labour. There's nobody in the cabinet that has business experience, and we're seeing that now. The economy is going into nosedive.
You're shaking your head. Well,
it's not going into nosedive, is it? Actually, the projections are we're doing better than our competitors, and I think the building issue. I mean, we're going to be building baby build, aren't we? We're going to be building those houses, creating the apprenticeships and jobs in the supply chain, giving people somewhere to live, and it gets growth in the economy
build,
too.
and I don't agree with
baby build. That's our slogan.
Well, God. But you see, this is the point is that the previous government started this huge building rush. Unless or until you invest in the infrastructure around it, you're going to really upend people's lives. So if you're going to start building 300, 400, 500, 600 homes on the edge of a village, you've got to put in the roads and the rail, and you've got to do that first. Haven't we learnt from any experience in the past? So when, for example, Thatcher provided the building of Canary Wharf, it was a white elephant until the Jubilee line and the infrastructure was opened. And there were reasons why they didn't get there and they didn't do it. It was a mistake. We should learn from that mistake.
Well, we have.
It was her mistake.
I don't think we are building white elephants. I think there's going to be communities where people want to live, and they will be built integrated.
Not if you haven't got schools, the hospitals, the doctors, the roads, the rail, the infrastructure.
Well, I've just said we're investing in the National Health Service, and you said we weren't. I mean, that's one of the things we are going to get more doctors.
But in terms of infrastructure and building, what we perhaps do need is more consensus, because these projects take a long time. What we can all agree on over several governments, and what we tend not to have is some consensus around what's required, and perhaps more of that would be beneficial. But I have to say, she's revised the figure down. You were going to build 1.5 million houses. She said in a statement last week that it's going to be 1.3 million.
Well, there's a lot of folks.
It won't even be 1 million by the time we get to the next general election.
There's a lot of folks who are going to have a house thanks to a Labour government that wouldn't have had one under the Tories. And don't forget the rearmament issue as well. We're putting a lot of money into defence now. We're taking that out of the international aid budget.
David Lammy hasn't spent all the money on his planes.
And putting it into defence, which again will create jobs and will create business support as well. So it's actually more growth.
But he's been dragged kicking and screaming into having to take action on defence because of the situation in Ukraine. He didn't get elected on the basis of putting more money into defence.
No, sure, but it will still create growth, though, won't it, Simon? I mean, that's one of the results.
I think we should be spending more on defence.
Yeah,
absolutely.
me too.
What do we make of this story on the front page of The Sun today?
We put our head in our hands, is what we do when we read this story. Better tell us about it.
Incredible. MP's dog on expenses.
Oh, my heavens.
So this is a senior Labour MP helping to impose $5 billion of benefits cuts. I mean, it was never going to work. As soon as you cut benefits, the paper's going to start saying, how do you spend your money? And you'll have David Lammy flying around the weather. I mean, it's the same with, Ed Miliband. Oh, let's go green. You've got to pay more tax. David Lammy, private jets, nice one. Do as I say, not do as I do. And this is another example. So she's claimed £900, and they're not saying, by the way, that it's illegal in any shape or form. She's done what she's meant to do. When are we just going to get rid of another quango and just say, we're not going to have an expenses system. We're just going to give you, as an MP, you get an allowance that we're going to assess how much it costs to have a second home in London, which is and everybody's going to have the same, and you can either make it work or you can't. You're done.
I mean,
and get rid of all the idiots who are tucking the forms and putting in the things and blah blah blah. Just 50 grand a year. That's how much it costs.
I mean, the issue here is that the defence is, well, A, it's within the rules, and B, sort of other people are doing it. This is a ludicrous defence. It obviously fails any kind of sense of, fairness or common sense. The dog is getting an allowance to live with their master in two different houses. Well, most people don't get to do that, do they?
And just how do they calculate that?
Well, quite.
And it's the judgment of the
MP. 900 quid as well, which sounds like a lot for a dog.
I think I'm going to put on my invoice to here. I'm going to say because I have to do this. I've got a couple of dogs. And I'm just, if you could give me 1,800 quid, because
if you don't mind awfully. But I mean, your point about this is maybe controversial. I would double the amount we spend on MPs' salaries and then cut out all of this expense nonsense.
Presumably, if you doubled that, then they'd all realise the 101,000 trip that Rachel has not dealt with, which I have to say the predecessor, George Osborne, started, and all of them, basically taking away allowances that particularly for the top end of council expenditure. So when you're talking about doctors, as in senior doctors, they're all earning around that sort of money, that they lose their personal allowance. That's over £100,000, which I understand is a lot of money. But we employ a lot of people at that sort of level.
I mean, MPs are different in the sense that they have to live in two different places.
Yeah, they do.
And we expect them to be in the community.
And I think we should pay them so that
that's
they can do that.
Also, it shouldn't be just the job of rich people. People who don't...
Correct. Who don't, like Rupert Law, who I quite admire in many respects, doesn't take a salary, but not many people are in a position to be able to do that.
Exactly,
and it doesn't help other politicians.
And I agree with you. I want somebody, whoever you are, to be able to do the job and do the job effectively. And I certainly don't want them to be thinking about money. So I would give them more money, and I would say, and now you have to stop with all the other stuff.
I think that's probably right, because it's so, and also, in expenses is included their staff costs, and that comes up as an expense. People say, why are you spending £200,000? These are the people doing all the casework, helping people out locally.
This is the number of people that you can have, and this is how much you pay, and this is what we give you.
This is another quango, isn't it?
I was just going to say that IPSA, Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority, massive quango, costs a fortune to run it. When I was in it, you were right, give the MP a wage and then give them an allowance, all set, a standard allowance to run things. I used to have to employ a part-time member of staff just to deal with it, to fill forms in, to claim for expenses.
It's a monster, isn't it?
It's a monster, an absolute monster.
It is a monster.
And a minefield.
We're all in agreement.
But we're violently agreeing, aren't we?
We are violently agreeing, but I think part of it is that if you are going to cut benefits, I think everybody knows the benefits bill is too high, and I think it doesn't matter which side of the political spectrum you go. Those who need help, I think society wants to make sure they get it. Those who want help but probably shouldn't get it, I think people think, no, enough. How on earth, though, do we deal with this rhetoric that we've had from Yvette Cooper, which has been very strong? And she has talked about, we're going to break the gangs, we're going to do this. In The Sun today, £200 million a year is basically going into these gangs. We haven't broken them yet. We understand how difficult it is, but we've also got huge amounts of people who are still arriving. I think it's 1,617 on small boats so far this week, and 20 whatever it is, thousands so far. And then we've also got tough rhetoric from Yvette Cooper on various measures that I don't think are going to work, I'm afraid, about how she wants to deal with migrants. This is just a toxic thing. Simon, from your perspective, is she saying the right stuff and not doing anything, or is she not saying the right stuff and not doing anything?
Well, what she doesn't want to do is stop the immigrants coming into the country. They have an open borders policy. That's the reality of it. If you cut to the chase, they have no intention of because we're a sophisticated country, and the same applies to the previous government, the Conservative government. No intention of really stopping the boats. We're a sophisticated company. If we wanted to, we could turn the boats around. We could stop these illegal immigrants coming into the country.
Now, I'm going to find out in a moment why Paul is shaking his head quite violently. We'll talk about that, and indeed the subject that keeps on giving, that of migrants and migration. That's next on Talk.
There was no evidence to support the initial accusation, leads me to believe that this was an overreaction. And looking at the video footage that you showed before this interview, where you had 6 police officers on a quiet, suburban, peaceful street to arrest 2 people who, from what you've said and from the reports, are just parents wanting the best for their child, seems to be a complete overaction.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
So 25 minutes past 8, very good morning. It's me, James Max, with you till 10 here on Talk. The gift that keeps on giving, immigration. Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, has pledged to end jobs on tap, it says here, for illegal immigrants by closing loopholes in Britain's lax border laws. So far, so good. When, however, you start to realise the measures that she's going to impose, that basically she's offloading all the responsibility to employers, announcing that rogue bosses of gig economy firms that employ workers without a visa could face unlimited fines and 5 years in prison, you begin to realise that she's not going to actually do anything about it. 10,000 people who arrived here on work or student visas have since claimed asylum, living in taxpayer-funded hotels and other accommodation. Anyway, Yvette Cooper says that she's going to have eligibility checks. Again, how are they going to work? We've got hundreds of thousands of people living in this country, probably without papers or illegally. How are you going to find them? mind you, if you or I, a law-abiding citizen, find ourselves on the wrong side of the law because we parked for 10 minutes too long in a place that we shouldn't have done, they'll find us. Anyway, Paul Richards, former Labour advisor, was about to defend Yvette Cooper.
Well, first of all, if there was one simple single thing that you could do, any government would do it. So you have to do a series of different things. This is quite wise, I think, because it means that we do know who these employers are, and they are identifiable. They are illegally employing people in this sort of black economy, and they know they're doing it, by the way. So they are, they are criminal endeavours. And by going after them, you can choke off the demand for these jobs, and you can say, the unlimited fines and even prison sentences is going to deter people from employing illegals.
If she
it's
said
a good idea, isn't it?
Well, if she said that was one of a suite of measures, then I would support it. But I guess part of the issue I've got is the whole range of other things that we could or should do, but we're not necessarily doing it.
Well, I think, disrupting the gangs by taking their phones off them, stopping the boats going anywhere near the coast, disrupting that supply chain in Europe, working more closely with the French and the Belgians, putting more money into border force. There are just a range of things you have to do to stop the boats and smash the gangs. But if you just say, put the Navy into the Channel,
there's an argument
then
to
we would do it. But you can't, and it won't work.
You say you can't, but
if they were serious about this, they would come out to the European Convention on Human Rights. That's the reality. It's not fit for purpose. We've got activist judges that are making all the wrong decisions, not allowing us to return illegal immigrants to their country of origin. That's what we need to do. Never mind tinkering around in terms of employers and everything else. Come out to the European Convention immediately and let's start returning people who shouldn't be here. People coming here on visas, we know where they've come from, and then we're letting them claim asylum. They've come here illegally. If they've come on a visa to then claim asylum, they've come here illegally. Return them to their country of origin.
I would say that if you're coming here legally on a visa, you are no longer somebody who can claim asylum.
Yes, exactly.
I don't understand how it can be allowed. So if you need to claim asylum, and look, if it wasn't for immigration, if it wasn't for that kind of asylum, 2-3 generations in, I wouldn't be here. So I get it. And I understand how important it is, and I understand that those safe routes must be there.
And currently 10,000 of them, those people that you're describing, being paid for by taxpayers. People listening to this show are having to pay for 10,000 people to stay in smart hotels.
They're not smart hotels, I can tell you.
Who came here, well...
I don't care whether they're smart hotels or not.
Well, I don't accept that at all. And being paid for to stay in smart hotels who should be returned to their country of origin. There's no excuse for it. It proves the point that Labour, and the Tories for that matter, have an open borders policy. They don't care. They're gaslighting us. They're pretending to play at this. The previous government and this current
But Blair
government
started the gaslighting.
So, absolutely.
And Cameron and Osborne continued it.
Yes. You're conflating two different things there, aren't you, between migration and illegal migration. People that came here...
I don't conflate the two, because
when the Poles and the Czechs came, they didn't come on small boats, did they?
No.
They came to work in our factories and to
I'm not
look after our
conflating,
kids,
but I'm saying... Yes, but I'm saying that both of them... we have had issues with this for the last 15 or 20 years.
And under Boris, don't forget.
And I don't have
Boris.
I don't have a problem with immigration, and it comes back to infrastructure. I've always used the analogy, which is we have invited people to come to this country to work because it has helped our economy.
Right.
But we've invited them, the equivalent of inviting somebody over to your house, and you haven't put any sheets on the bed, and you haven't given them a towel. And there's no food in the fridge. And by the way, you've gone out and bought the dogs and there's no one there. So we're kind of basically saying to people, come and do all this stuff and we're not going to prepare for you. We haven't built the housing. We haven't done the infrastructure. We haven't invested the money. So we basically took the money in the same way that in the 70s and the 80s, we took the money from the North Sea and we just kind of spent it, as opposed to actually investing it and doing what the Norwegians did. And that was a mistake. And then we've now got a mistake. If we've got, mad rush for net zero policies, we've got a whole load of energy that we could use. Nobody else is doing any of this stuff. And we're just blindly going off and doing a whole load of daft nonsense.
And continuing your analogy, it's invited somebody over to your home that you've not prepared for and asking them to bring their family of dependents, which is what the Conservative government did, and they can come and stay as well.
And it's like, if it's your wife or husband or child, I get it. If it's your cousin, your grandparents. I wouldn't go.
Let's not lose sight of two things, though. One is migration helps our economy, and you've alluded to that. And the other is
the economy would be growing much more than it is if that were the case.
And the other point is you do need to give people asylum who genuinely need it, because that is part of our international obligation.
Well, I don't have an argument with that.
And both of your families came here, didn't they? I mean, Mr. Dan Shook. That's not exactly an Anglo-Saxon name, is it?
It's more complicated than that. But most of these people, having been an MP and met many illegal immigrants, most of these people are economic migrants. That's the reality of it.
Paul, you just picked up and said Dan Shook, not a very Anglo-Saxon name.
Well, it's not. And Simon and I are old friends, and I can get away with that.
You can get away with that sort of racism.
We have a
just casual racism.
We have a great tradition.
It's coming from the Labour Party, great tradition of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party.
We have a great tradition of attracting people into the UK to come and work and settle and to make a life, and that's a good thing.
And the British are all about fairness, aren't they?
Right.
And they see the illegal immigrants coming over.
Here's the difference.
It's very unfair.
We've had a great tradition of attracting people to come here and work. In recent years, we've used that to suppress wages. In recent years, we haven't integrated.
Well, that's why we have a national minimum wage, so it's not actually depressing wages, is it?
Well, I think we have done. And then, in addition to that, because a lot of those people are highly skilled, so we're not talking about the national minimum wage, and we shouldn't be for those sorts of skills and levels, that we've undermined the skills, the apprentices, the training in all those higher skilled jobs because we've taken the lower wages. In addition to that, we haven't integrated as well. Some people have integrated brilliantly from all around the world. I don't care where you come from, I don't care what your religion is or your background, and I don't necessarily expect you to speak English as the first language, but I do expect you to speak English, and I do expect you to understand the customs. We have not enforced that.
Yeah.
Partly because of the volume of people. How can you do that with 600,000, 700,000, 800,000 people who come over to a country? How do you expect them to learn to stand on the right when they're on the escalator going down to the tube?
Well, tourists don't even manage that, do they? When they visit London. But I mean, the number of people who literally can't speak any English at all is quite small, and they should be given English lessons. Most people coming here have got 2 or 3 languages and speak more languages than the people here already. And I think absolutely,
other than English,
English should be.
Sorry, I just said that out loud.
Should be the thing that we teach people first. Because it's the access to the labour market.
But that's because we've had politicians who believe in multiculturalism, which has been a complete total failure.
But how
for
are you
this
defining
country.
that? What does that mean?
Well, what that means is that we've got politicians who believe that minorities should be able to live their lives however they want instead of integrating.
Can I ask a question,
though? That's completely wrong.
Because you just said that you'd like people to learn English. Shouldn't we be spending more resources on learning the language on the basis that technology will now do a lot of the translation, get rid of all the translation services up and down? Why is the NHS spending so much money?
You could do it with AI, yeah, absolutely. It's a good example of technology in the public services, isn't it? Why not?
Why not? We've got a level of agreement. Meanwhile, have I got a solution for a big London problem? Oh, yes. That's coming next on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
8:36 is time for Good Morning. Simon Danchuk, former Labour MP and also former Labour advisor Paul Richards there with me in the studio. So it looks like, I think we got a bit of a voice note, is that right? That we got a little voice note that maybe you should hear. Is that from Mark? It's from Mark. Let's have a listen to what Mark has to say.
Yeah, good morning. It's Mark in Lancashire. Just wanted to have a word about the more Labour gaslighting about the level of accommodation that these migrants are in, saying that they're not in plush hotels. They are in plush hotels. The hotel near me that they're in is a Mercure, and it would cost me about £110 to £120 a night. So if a family of four wanted to go and spend a weekend in that hotel to visit relatives, which they can't do now, actually, because it's full of migrants, but if a family of four did want to go and stay there, it would cost probably about £500 or £600. That's what I call plush. That's what most working families can't afford.
I think Mark makes a good point, doesn't he? You're shaking your head.
Well, I am, because I live in Eastbourne and we've got the migrant hotels in this particular town, and they are not plush hotels. And of course, there's a lot of young men all crowded in there hours a day. They're not getting room service, so they're not getting their chambermaid doing their rooms out. They're just kicking their heels. I mean, one argument I would put forward is that they should be allowed to work.
Well, you say they should be allowed to work, but they're receiving free bed and board. Our streets are disgusting.
They should be cleaning them up. They should be put into work details.
So we should be returning them to the country they came from. That's the solution.
But this is while they're processing the asylum claims.
Mark is right. They're being put in plush hotels.
They're not plush.
Not least because the demand is so great. And since Labour came to power, the numbers have gone through the roof.
How about this?
Than ever before.
I think we should ban profiteering. Those companies that are making the money out of the asylum hotels, they should either be taxed.
The government's commandeered them.
Either taxed to the hill.
So they might say no.
It's another Labour lie, isn't it? He said he would get rid of the hotels. In the run-up to the general election, Starmer said, we will scrap asylum hotels.
I don't think they should be profiteering from them, though.
Well, but
there's people driving around in sports cars.
But hang on a second, you don't think they should be profiteering from them? You have taken them out of service. Government has taken them out of service. So if the operator has an opportunity to say, actually, no, I don't want to do this, they have to be able to make a profit. What a nonsense thing to say.
It's not nonsense. I think if people are profiteering by having these hotels chock full of people, there wouldn't be out of season.
Okay, so then
I don't think they should be getting the money.
What about the lawyers who are profiteering out of all the asylum claims and everything else?
Well, that's another question.
Right, so we get rid of them. What about the energy companies who are profiteering out of things?
Do you think it's fair that hotel owners are just absolutely coining it in, these £1 million businesses?
I think it's worse. I think it's worse that the government sees fit to put people in there in the first place.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We need to be returning people. And credit to Labour, they've been returning more than the Conservatives
have.
But it's nowhere near enough.
Right.
Many more.
We've got to do a very serious thing here.
Yeah.
Sadiq Khan, not everybody's favourite. If you are in London, so he's been London Mayor since before I was born, I think. He's been London Mayor for a very long time. As a Londoner, born and bred, he has irritated me more than any other mayor. Even though I disliked Ken Livingstone's views and his anti-Semitism quite significantly, he did some incredible things for London, and I could see where he was coming from. So the reason that London has some high rise is because of Ken Livingstone. The reason that international businesses and actually the Olympics and all sorts of things, Ken Livingstone, did some great things, even though he had his moments. I can't think of a single thing that Sadiq Khan has done that I would be happy with. I think the extraordinary things that he has done to our roads, the lack of attention to whether it's policing or otherwise, the complete disregard for business and what business is here to do in the city, I think he's been a terrible mayor. Am I wrong?
No, I agree with you completely. And he wouldn't be mayor now if the Conservatives were half decent in London at playing politics and picking the right candidate to fight the election. They made a complete hash of that. There's a big number of people in London who don't want Sadiq Khan as the mayor, but because of the Conservatives and the election.
Paul, you're very quiet on this. Are you a Sadiq fan?
I am actually, and I think clean air is one of the things he'll be remembered for, because although the enormous row about ULEZ, and there's no denying of that, Labour lost a by-election over that issue, actually the air's cleaner now. There'll be kids growing up without asthma thanks to Sadiq Khan.
Sadly, it's cleaner because of cars, and they're better, but also go into the tube where he's encouraging us to go, and the air is not clean at all.
Well, that's the next big job for the next Labour mayor, who may be Idris Elba.
Okay, so this is the story. Let's move on to this. So Idris Elba could take on his toughest role yet. Labour want him to be the next London mayor. Is this because...
Well, hang on, Labour want... That's doing a lot of heavy lifting, There's a big selection process to
Labour
come.
bigwigs say Idris is top...
Name them. Name these bigwigs.
Is top of our list to be the candidate to run for City Hall. I mean, I have to say... I mean, it's a good choice. It's clever. Well, I mean, he's a brilliant orator.
I think there's quite a few Labour politicians who'd be quite surprised by this story.
There's a list of them here: Dawn Butler, Stella Creasy, Rosanna Allen Khan, all after the job.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's right.
If any of the rest of them, I mean, Dawn Butler, Stella Creasy, and I don't know who
Rosanna Allen Khan, Tooting MP.
Okay, I don't care. I don't know.
She's a doctor. She works in St George's. She's a good thing.
South of the river. No,
fair enough.
But any of those, we'll have to leave.
Well, if
Foreign Secretary David Lammy is another possible candidate.
Are we not a bit worried about putting celebrities into these jobs though? Because I think it is a politician's job.
Yes, he did. Yeah, no, and Boris is half a celebrity.
Well, that's true.
And Boris was very good.
Quite good, isn't he?
I don't know. I'm a bit worried though, because then he gets to get the war of the celebrities.
Labour,
but they're politicians first who became celebrities because of that. This is actually a proper Hollywood star.
Excellent.
Would that work?
True. Yeah.
Well, you'd be voting for him?
Given how useless Sadiq Khan has been. Yeah. Given how useless, and Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
Given how useless Sadiq Khan has been, and how awful our general crop of politicians, why do you think reform have risen in terms of popularity or otherwise? It's because I think people were fed up with the Tories after 14 years, have failed and missed goals and opportunities, and they'll say now, well, we didn't do this and we terrible mistakes. And then they've elected Labour, they've given them a landslide, and look what they've done with it, an absolute shambles.
And talking of reform, talking of reform, there is a suggestion that Ant Middleton might well be their candidate for London Mayor. So we're going to have a fight-off between two celebrities. It could be quite interesting.
Could be celeb-tastic. I mean, listen, we live in a reality show, and twas ever thus. I mean, in terms of where this is going, we're going to have this sort of like push-pull politics. People in power are always going to have the difficulty that there's always something to complain about, and those who are out of power, frankly, don't have any power, and all they can do is sit and snipe for the sidelines. I think, though, there are so many things. We're getting to the stage that somebody is going to have to come up with a radical plan. We cannot continue with the status quo of whether it's Labour or Conservative pushing up tax, taking down tax, adding this, taking it away, tinkering around the edges. We have to have a planning system that's fit for purpose, which means infrastructure planning too, and it means going across the lines and the borders of local authorities, because I'm afraid that has not worked. When it comes to national infrastructure, that has not worked, and we need to define what national infrastructure is.
Look at airports. It takes decades to build one runway. China do 50 in a year. It's ridiculous.
Schiphol has 6 runways, and we've got 2 at Heathrow. We need to just sort that out. And then the thing is, people say, "Oh, Heathrow's in the wrong place." Heathrow's only in the wrong place if you don't put the right infrastructure to support it. So sort out the roads, sort out the rails, sort out the parking. And the power. And the power. Well, the thing, interestingly, they had the power.
But you make this point that we need a radical change in politics, and I do think we've had Punch and Judy politics over the last several years, but they've all been fighting and tweaking.
Unlike Reform, of course, who are absolute harmony, and there's 5 of them, and they're fighting each other.
Labour and Conservatives have been fighting for the last few years, but they've only been fighting over the centre ground. And I take your point. I think we need radical change in this country, whether it's in terms of benefits, illegal immigration, crime. We need somebody to come in and radically change it.
Are we at the stage, Paul, where after this shambolic Labour fiasco, which it's turning into, that we're sort of moving to... So I say. So I'm seeing chimes of the 1970s of running out of money, of running out of ideas, and the Tories just in a complete state of disarray, and there being no real alternative and sort of rises elsewhere. That in fact what we're going to see is the rise of somebody, and I don't know who it is, but somebody who is as radical as Thatcher, who is prepared to take on the vested interests of whether it's the civil service and the sort of core sort of like, I don't know, sort of centrist views, or indeed these sort of powerhouses of, as you said, this merry-go-round of people who just pop in from one role to the next, that in fact we just need a bit of a clear-out, in the same way that, we needed a clear-out in the 70s from the Red Trouser Brigade, who, held a whole load of sort of like power and money.
I think the test for that thesis will be the Runcorn by-election, which is in the next few weeks, and I think if Reform are serious, then they will take that election. If they're not, then the wheels will come off. But that is the first proper electoral test of the kind of desire for change you're talking about.
We'll
so
see.
let's see.
Full list of candidates.
Full list of candidates is available, of course.
It's available, presumably on our website, which I dare say somebody is sorting out. But yes, you're absolutely right. So there we are. All sorts of stories that we've discussed. We've had some good old banter. Thank you both very much indeed.
Nice to see you.
Thanks to former Labour MP. We have to describe you as that, but it's
come up with a new title, perhaps.
I don't know. Author.
Yes, that's
voice of common sense.
Celebrity
author. You can get for London Mayor. Simon Danchuk, and also former Labour advisor Paul Richards. Thank you both very much indeed. Still to come, we turn our attention to some more big stories, and we're going to be taking some of your calls. I'm sorry if you haven't got to them yet, and a whole load of messages that have come in under the deluge as well. So there we are. That's all still to come here on Talk.
It was the 29th of January. It was about 11:45, and I was in this very room. I was on a Zoom call for a work thing, and in the bit of the screen where you see yourself, I suddenly saw two police officers standing behind me. I saw the high-vis yellow of their vests. I hadn't heard them enter the house, and that was the first sign I knew that something very strange was happening. So I awkwardly tried to close down the Zoom, and a few moments later, they arrested me.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
So, very good morning to you. It's me, James Max, with you till 10 here on Talk. In a moment, I'll be opening the phone lines once again. 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number. So you can have your say. Been talking about I don't know, moves or otherwise by Yvette Cooper, closing loopholes, trying to make migrants who are seeking asylum after their visas expire, and I'm asking you what should be done about it. 0344 499 1000. However, just before the little break there, we were talking about the Runcorn and Helsby constituency. There is, of course, a by-election taking place there on Thursday, the 1st of May, and it would be remiss of me if I didn't read the full list of candidates for you. So, Catherine Blakelot is representing the English Democrats, Danny Clark, the Liberal Party, Chris Copeman, the Green Party, Paul Duffy, the Liberal Democrats, Peter Ford, the Workers' Party of Britain. Howling Lord Hope is from the official Monster Raving Loony Party. Sean Holston is from the Conservative and Unionist Party, Paul Murphy, Social Democratic Party, Sarah Pochin from Reform UK, Karen Louise Shaw from the Labour Party, and Michael Williams, who's an independent. There you go. That's your full list. 0344 499 1000. That's the telephone number. Let's go to your calls. Ian's in... where are you? Bradford. Ian.
Yeah, Bradford City of Culture, James.
Yeah, no, I was looking at my screen because it says Bardford, but I'm assuming that's because somebody behind the glass has been typing with their elbows, Ian.
Yeah, well, south of Watford, that's what happens, isn't it? Right, the Yvette Cooper's a little solution to the system.
Oh, yes.
This is nothing new, James. This has been going on for years. If you look on various programmes, the border control are constantly picking people up, taking them to a police station to send them back to the country of origin. Now, this is okay, except for the Chinese. Now, China say, you have got to prove what part of China this guy comes from before we'll accept him back, which takes weeks. So what happens is the police let them back onto the streets and say, oh, come back in 2 weeks and keep reporting to us. And what happens? They disappear back into the system.
To be fair, though, the problem of illegal migration is not really from China, is it?
It's not illegal migration, James. These are people that are coming to the country, inverted commas, legally. I'm not talking about the boat people.
Right.
I'm talking about over the years, the various people that have come into the country that have overstayed, which is what Yvette Cooper's going on about. It's nothing new.
So do you... Okay, so... No. Right, okay, I understand.
About it, James. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I understand your point. I think you make a good point. So what can or should be done about it? Because if we know about it and we know the difficulties, and she's talking about 10,000 people who arrived on work and student visas, they've since... But she's talking about the people who have since claimed asylum. I don't think the Chinese people who are overstaying their welcome are necessarily claiming asylum. They're just overstaying their welcome, aren't they?
There are lots of claiming asylum, but of course the asylum system takes so long to do.
Yes.
But having said that, the number of people that are in, what she needs to do is allow the border force to do its job properly and then make the authorities obey what the border force is trying to do, and that's send people back who shouldn't be in the country.
How do we deal with the fact that I think even when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister, he said there were up to 500,000 people here illegally. Chances are it's probably 1 million by now.
Yeah, it probably is.
What do we do?
Because the system is not working. The system is there. It needs implementing. And if the people down in the Ivory Towers down in Westminster are not going to do it properly...
But you say send them back. But where do you send them back to? Because...
You send them back to the country of origin, James.
Sure. But, OK. So what if the plane that you send, they say, you haven't got the paperwork right, we're not letting them off the plane, it goes back?
It's happening every week. People are being sent back to the country of origin and are being accepted. The only... Well, I nearly said something woke then. The only problem is, as far as China are concerned, it takes so long to do that they go back into the system, they reintegrate themselves and disappear.
OK, fair enough. Ian, you make some strong points there, but I can see that this has been a problem for years and there's an argument to say it hasn't been tackled. 0344 499 1000. That's telephone number. David's in London. Hello, David.
Oh, hi, good morning. I'm totally confused now. I didn't know there was any Chinese coming here, but they're still there. You are.
Well, he was talking about legal migration and talking about people who come here maybe to study or indeed to visit, and then they overstay their welcome and then they just slip off into the system. I mean, there are so many different categories of immigration, some which starts as legal, some which starts as illegal. Sometimes it's the boats, sometimes it's actually just arriving on our shores and on a holiday, and then suddenly they slip off into the ether. It's just a bit of a nightmare.
Well, let's just look at the small boat situation, James. There isn't. I've been watching this going on for years. I'm so sick of it now. As we all are, there is no small boats crisis.
Oh.
If you look at it, every time they mention the small boats crisis, there is a big border force boat bringing them in. Bringing them in a few hundred yards off the French coast, pick them up, bring them in. I've not got a clue what's going on anymore. Somebody must know what's going on, but I haven't got a clue. But if the French go to help these people who may be in distress, they turn the French boats away. So they don't want to go to France, do they? Now, just before the last election, I rang into your programme, which I've listened to for quite a while now, and I said, I'll tell you why the Tories can win the next election. You had a panel on.
Oh, yes.
Similar to your panel this morning, who were very good, by the way. I rang in and they said, what do you mean you know how to win the Tories? I said, look, remember what Boris Johnson said? Boris Johnson just said, let's get Brexit done. One simple phrase got him a 90-seat majority, correct?
Yes.
All the Tories had to do was to stop the boats, to say, look, we're putting boats into the channel. Nobody comes in now. Nobody. We just turn them back. And at the end of the day, one of your panel said to me, what would you do if they threatened to jump in? Now, I was very polite at that point, James. I just said, well, look, that's their prerogative. But at the end of the day, they could have stopped it. The Tories could have stopped it. I've been a...
What is more concerning to you, though? The illegal migration, small boats, which is, 40, 50, 60,000 a year, or the hundreds of thousands a year of net migration. So even last time around, the number was 660, which is 1,000, which is the equivalent of a city of people who arrived in the last 12 months extra, which is more concerning to you.
You're right, James. Unfortunately, the small boats ones tends to be mainly the emotive issue. So. Yeah. We've dealt with that, right? We'll put that one side. Right, at the end of the day, I listened to that lovely blonde girl who Mr. Trump's now got as his main spokesperson. You know the one I mean?
Yes.
Right. She said the other day that somebody in the audience said, look, how many of these people who are arriving illegal are actually criminals? Who are criminals? She said, all of them. Because it's criminal to enter the United States if you're uninvited.
And that's a very interesting point. David, we'll leave it there, but thank you very much indeed for your call. We'll take some more of your calls after the news at 9. 0344 499 1000, by the way, is the telephone number. Also, after the break, I'm going to be joined by political commentator Piers Pottinger. He'll be joining me in the studio to discuss the big stories from the morning's papers. And if that wasn't enough, we'll get some more solutions like this from the socials. James, why do we not issue an international arrest warrant from any French naval captain escorting dinghies into UK waters? Arrest them as enabling people smugglers. Well, maybe on that bombshell we'll do that. Anyway, we'll continue our conversation after this.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because, as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Coming up 3 minutes past 9 o'clock. Very good morning to you. It's me, James Max. I'm with you till 10 here on Talk. Still plenty to come on your weekend breakfast show this Mother's Day morning. I know, I hope you've remembered. I think I have, and hope you've remembered to reset your clock as well. Slightly caught out by that this morning, but anyway, here we are. Still to come, going to be joined very shortly live in the studio by Piers Pottinger. We'll be going through the political stories of the day. Also, I've got a right roll roundup with the biographer Angela Levin. So that's going to be quite exciting on a day when we've got a massive royal story. Also, we're going to hear about a new podcast from Amy Hart. She's going to be talking about her Mum's Club podcast. And if that wasn't enough, I'm going to try and sort out the absolute mess and chaos that is the amount of messages that you've been sending me this morning. So thank you for those. We will try and get through as many of them as we possibly can. 87222. Start your text with the word talk. Don't forget, you can tweet or X me or whatever you want to call it at talkTV at the James Max. And even better, you can give me a call, 0344 499 1000. So very good morning to you. And yes, we've been talking about Yvette Cooper and what should be done about the thousands of immigrants who arrive legally but overstayed their welcome. What would you do to perhaps reduce the number? Do we need to have some shape or form? We came up with a plan earlier that I thought was actually eminently sensible, which is one of the ways to deal with this is before you get a job, or before you use the health service, or indeed access any service, you need to either prove your identity with two forms of identity, such as a passport or a driver's licence or, I don't know, a key service bill or whatever it may be. And if you don't have those, then you have to go and get a temporary card, which you can get from the government, which means that we can start to sort of track people who are not necessarily in a fixed piece of accommodation or otherwise. And you can get a temporary identity card. And maybe that is a way. And if you don't have one or other of those things, you cannot access the services. You cannot get a job. Maybe that's the way forward. And also, look, the measures that Yvette Cooper putting forward, you know, going after those people who employ, maybe that's a good thing. We will see. Anyway, I'm joined now by Piers Pottinger, political commentator, and he's here now. Good morning.
Morning.
I've been having a bit of a rant this morning, so maybe you'll calm my nerves. Let's start, and look, I mean, we've been talking about immigration and things. It is Sunday, so let's talk about the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. Funny enough, with you having done a certain amount of PR in your life, you've advised companies and people, and you've got them out of all manner of situations. This headline in the Sunday Telegraph does not read well. Harry is a bully, says charity chief. Centre Barley chairman accuses Duke using the press for harassment at scale. I mean, I wonder whether either Harry's as bad as everybody says he is, and so is Meghan, Alternatively, this lady is as bad as the whole board of the charity say. Alternatively, they're all as bad as each other. Where would you stand, and how would you fix Harry's reputation? Because it's, however you look at it, this isn't good.
No, it isn't. And I mean, it's very hard to know the truth because these are very big egos on both sides of the argument. I think for once I'm a little bit sympathetic towards Harry, which I would never normally be.
I mean, I do think that criticising somebody because you wanted to sort of move the order of, you know, for a photograph, well, it's his charity.
Yeah.
His wife.
Yeah.
He can, you know, somebody wants to get in the way or whatever. Well,
and it was for photographs, and the reason the press were there was for him,
not
and
for her.
For the chief executive of the charity. As far, I mean, I haven't read the whole her whole statement, but she seems to be saying that accusing Harry of bullying because he resigned without telling her, and she calls it bullying at scale, whatever that means.
You see, because I wonder whether, and there is a bit of me where I'm fairly certain that working with any member of the royal family is probably challenging.
Yes, it is. I've done that, and I mean, I've advised members of the royal family.
Which ones?
I'm not at liberty to say, but
he's a pro.
But no, because it was in confidence, and we did it pro bono and over many years. But I think it's a very difficult situation for Harry. It's not what he would have wanted. His Archewell Foundation has already come under a great deal of scrutiny for perhaps not being as charitable as it might appear to be.
Well, indeed not, and I'm not surprised. I mean, you have a look at the numbers. And I mean, I do think, and I did say earlier, and I think I will continue to say, is that I think that there are two sides to this story.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure that taking on the chief executive role of a charity that was founded by a member of the British royal family and relies on him for fundraising or otherwise, and then also he is a liability.
Yes.
In the sense that if you, not in a bad way, but I'm afraid if you go from a member of the royal family and therefore you're able to knock on every door and to raise money, and then through your choices you make your brand somewhat toxic in the short or medium term, then there are issues that you are going to have to issue when it comes to raising money, because people don't want to give you as much money as they gave before.
No, exactly.
Because you're not as close to the seat of power. You know, you're a little bit, you know, of a sort of like damaged brand.
Yeah. And there's no question he is a damaged brand to most people. But I think also what we've got here is a chief executive who is I think, to put it politely, feisty corporate lawyer by background, who is used to getting things done and calling the shots. And then when you move into the role of charity, it's a slightly different world. And she may have found the whole thing rather uncomfortable from the outset.
I mean, certainly from my experience of being involved as I am with a national charity and, you know, a very complicated set of governance. Governance is difficult and the rules are different and they're not the same as business.
No.
In business, you can say, and as chief executive, what you say goes.
Yeah.
With a charity, you as chief executive answer to your trustees, and if the trustees don't like what you say or do, you can be gone.
And also, I think here, one shouldn't forget that her family are one of the biggest donors to this charity. So they would have felt that they had more justification for calling the shots than just a simple employee would. And I think that that's where, I mean, this is a power struggle if ever there was one. But I fear that from Harry's point of view, it will not, in the long term, do him any good at all.
No. And I suppose, and again, you know, we talk about sort of corporate law. So this is a corporate lawyer who basically became chair of trustees, which again, and just in case I conflated or mixed up, this is not the chief executive role where you're appointed to do the thing and you're paid a salary and you'll have employment rights. This is somebody who's chair of a group of trustees, and you have to have the confidence of your other trustees.
Oh, definitely.
And if you don't and you lose the confidence, and I've had this situation as well where I've had to, you know, remove somebody from office, even if they are elected or supported or otherwise, if somebody becomes, you know, inoperable and you as chair or whatever it is think that that's not workable. It's part of your job as government. So if all the other trustees lose confidence in the chair, then the chair must go.
Yes, absolutely. And
quietly.
And again, I mean, this role is I mean, it's a relatively small charity, and
but it's ended up on the front pages.
Exactly. Very strange.
Very strange. Okay. Now, what do you make of the story here, which is front page of The Sun? MP's dog on expenses. This is the senior Labour MP helping to propose $5 billion of benefits cuts. We've had these sort of. This is the party whip, Toyo Owatime, who's 32. She's received £900 of dog rent. Now, it's not against the rules, so nobody's saying she's broken the rules, and so they're saying, well, it's all fine. This is shining a light once again on a system that seems to be broken. Why do we have MPs' expenses? Why don't we just pay them what we should pay them, and then they can, like any other job? So, for example, your job, if you have to live in a foreign country, you'll be given an allowance to do it. It's not expenses. And then you have business expenses that you can legally claim, and it doesn't include staff. Staff are included in your budget, and you will be paid a salary to take account of the fact that you're flying backwards and forwards or doing this, or you'll be given a certain amount of travel. I mean, it's just like, stop with all these individual lines.
Yes, I mean, I agree with you. I've always believed that MPs should be paid more because we might get better MPs as a result. And
why is that so toxic?
I don't understand why it is, because now most civilized countries now realise this and do pay their MPs properly. Actually, the highest paid MPs of all are in Singapore, believe it or not. The highest paid Prime Minister in the world is in Singapore.
And how much do they get?
I think, well, hundreds of thousands, and the Prime Minister is in the millions. So, but
because I would do that. I
don't see anything wrong with it. I think they should be paid, and then we wouldn't get into all this quagmire of the Chancellor of the Exchequer being on the front page for accepting a couple of tickets for a Taylor Swift concert. I mean, it's ridiculous.
It is
really
ridiculous, and I would take a whole look at the system, and I would say you cannot have a chief executive of a local authority who is paid more than the Prime Minister.
No.
You cannot have a situation where MPs are not necessarily able to employ the staff they need. They should be given a certain number of resources that the taxpayer pays for, and then that's it. We should be really clear about what people get and what they receive, and then also what they don't get once they leave office. In the same way that you have a job, you're paid, and when you're let go, you let go.
But in return for paying them properly, I'd make them work properly.
Correct.
They get very long recesses, i.e. holidays.
Yes.
They get an enormous amount of time off. I'd pay them properly, make them really accountable, and make them work harder for their constituents.
I would too. We're going to see, having had actually yesterday, whilst I was presenting this programme, a lot of discussion about, well, Yvette Cooper, where is she?
Yeah.
Well, you can't get her off your screens today, and nor will you for the rest of the week. So finally she's bobbed her head above the parapet. There's a bit of me that says, OK, good, you're saying that you're getting on with it and the rhetoric is strong. When you start to look at the detail, you realise that she's either offsetting and coming up with the same stuff that she said before, and you wonder whether it's going to turn from rhetoric into action. Because very soon she's going to start playing the blame game and saying, I said that we were going to do this, and these people have got in the way, and this is why it hasn't. Excuse. Alternatively, the measures and ideas that she's coming up with are just not very good.
No, they're not very good. And also, let's go back a bit. Don't forget, the Labour Party spent 14 years voting against everything the Conservatives tried to do in immigration. Everything they voted against. Now they're in power and realise how difficult the situation is. They're now trying to do some of the same things, only they don't quite know how to do it. And only a few months ago, Angela Rayner was saying boldly on lots of television programmes that she was going to get everyone out of these hotels and move them into some magical accommodation somewhere.
Angela Rayner is the woman who said that we were going to have 1.5 million homes built by the end of the Parliament, which we're not.
We're going to have one. They've now, but in the spring statement, 1.3. Well, that's 200,000 less already, and that's in a matter of months.
We were already building 250,000 homes a year
in the first place.
So I dare say that they'll come back and it'll be 1.1 million, which basically means that they've added an extra 100,000.
Yeah, and what's happening is as the months
progress, let alone the term of this Parliament, the housing target they set themselves is coming down and down and down. And anyway, who's going to benefit from these houses? Mostly, these are the asylum seekers and a lot of illegal immigrants where there's nowhere else to put them if they're going to get them out of hotels.
And meanwhile, and this just steers us on to, I suppose, Rachel Reeves and the spring statement that she made, not a budget. We have a range of taxes which, in my view, are really quite damaging to our economy. And we're not really talking about it because people don't either want to go into tax, they find it dull, or there's no discussion. Financial literacy or tax literacy isn't great in this country. But, for example, national insurance, I would ban calling it national insurance. It's not. It's income tax, or it's tax on working. So national insurance is not paid by those who have unearned income. It's paid by those who have earned income. So basically, if you are in a job and paid, you will have to pay national insurance. If you are at home sitting on a big portfolio, you will not. Strikes me as odd. The second thing that I would say is we have a range of other taxes which are very sort of discriminatory, that we've got this mess around council tax, double council tax in certain places, which probably damage certain resorts, which is being done for ideological reasons. You've got the VAT going on school fees, which again is, in my view, ideological. They say to raise money for education. I don't think it's going to make a difference. The first thing they decided to do with education is to provide breakfast clubs, which, okay, fine, I get it. But at the top of my list would be class sizes. Second on my list would be quality of school buildings and playing fields. Third would be quality of teachers. In fact, maybe I'd switch it around and say, you know, you can have terrible... I went to a school which was apparently very expensive. The buildings were falling down. But the facilities were amazing and the teaching was amazing. That, to me, and class sizes were 20, 21, 22, which means that a teacher can actually... I mean, you know, imagine controlling 20... I can hardly control this studio with like 2 or 3 people in it.
Well, I think on education, Bridget Phillipson's done more damage to education since she's been in power than many educational secretary for the last, as far as I can remember.
What's she done wrong?
Well, she's first of all the VAT on private schools. She boasted that she never been to a private school. Well, how can you be Secretary for State of Education? She also, for example, without really making a song and dance or announcing it officially, removed the funding for teaching Latin in state schools, which was only £4 million, but it means no Latin is taught in state schools officially from now on, which is absurd. I mean, she's doing things and class sizes. Everything she does, she is around the edges. She's not improving education. She's actually lowering the standards.
And this is about choice, isn't it? Which is, you know, for some people, learning Latin, they might say, look, I don't want to learn Latin, I don't want to learn ancient Greek or something. But for some people, they'll understand how important Latin can be for understanding the language. So if, for example, you want to go into biological studies, if you want to go into the medical profession, if you want to go into the legal profession, if you want to even study language, then the construction of Latin and how it works is actually very important because so many parts of the language emanate from it. And therefore your command of that language, which will be your tool in trade, will be so important.
Well, I remember the great Labour cabinet minister of old, Richard Crossman, also editor of the New Statesman. He studied classics and he was a great, he stood up for it and said it helped him with journalism because you learn how to compose essays in Latin and Greek, and he was able to compose different kinds of pieces for the Daily Mirror compared to the Times, for example.
Exactly.
And so the classics is the basis, the fundamental basis of all our languages in
But I think that there is a deep misunderstanding if you listen to how people talk, and this isn't about accent, this is about the words they use and their inability to deploy language effectively.
Yes.
If you listen to how people talk in positions of power, and I think it's true of the Conservatives to a large extent, and I think it's certainly true of Labour to a large extent, that our political class of today is not deploying language in a way that people can understand. I think Boris Johnson, you know, for all people might say he's a toff and he's a very effective communicator. Why? Because of his choice of words and the way that he speaks. Of course. Tony Blair was a very effective communicator, again, because he had the breadth of language and the sort of like level of training and skill that allowed him to deploy it effectively.
And Nigel Farage,
who's the best communicator in politics in this country at the moment, because he's got a tiny party and it's all about him, because he's the one who communicates directly.
They're arguably, compared to other parties, their popularity has increased
enormously, and quite rightly so, because sadly the Conservatives, sadly in my view, are failing to score any points in opposition.
But I think part of that is they haven't decided what their big policy is.
No, well, why keep saying it? I mean, why hold a big event called policy renewal and then make the big announcement that you haven't actually got any policies?
But they don't have any policies.
It does seem rather pointless.
I mean, if I was in charge of that shower, the one thing I would do is I would talk about how to fix things.
Yes.
And I know that that's something that Nigel Farage has been talking about, but I would focus it on a slightly different level. Nothing can work in this country until or unless we have an economy that attracts inward investment and brings back aspiration.
You need incentives.
Yes.
Margaret Thatcher always said what people need is aspiration, but they need incentives. And this government doesn't understand this. There are no incentives for anyone at the moment. It's all doom and gloom. And on the one hand, Rachel Reeves, who sounds quite often like Vic Reeves, the nonsense she spouts, she talks about growth.
I think Vic Reeves makes more sense.
Well, Vic and he's funnier, and some would say better looking. But anyway, he also, Bob Mortimer's a national treasure.
Well, he is
having a long way off.
Spoiler
Rachel
alert
Reeves.
as to what he just won.
But I mean, she. Also, Rachel Reeves making these comments, she always goes on about growth, yet everything she's done is anti-growth. And everyone can see that, even the wonderful OBR who seem to run the country now rather than this government, sees that she's
banish
wrong.
the OBR. I would banish...
So would I.
I would have very sharp words for the Bank of England, whose ability to forecast is...
dreadful.
It is dreadful. And I would say, as part of your forecasting, you are going to speak to those fellows and ladies and gentlemen at Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley and the other, particularly international investment banks, who seem to get it more right than you do.
Yeah.
Your analysis is weak. With Rachel Reeves, I am distinctly concerned at her economic illiteracy.
Totally, yes. I mean, absolutely.
And this pretense that she does understand is even more damaging. So, for example, as a charity trustee, as I am, we have to find significant extra money in order to deal with the national insurance increase that she's put through. As a chair of a sports club, which is a CASC, which is a non-profit organisation, again, not-for-profit organisation, again, we have to find that money.
Yeah.
And I find it absolutely extraordinary that she thinks that these measures are in some way going to incentivise people to employ more people. They're not. Where are the incentives for people taking risk and understanding that if you take risk, that means reward, and it doesn't mean, well, you're rewarded with another bigger tax bill.
But she also seems to introduce taxes without thinking them through properly. For example, this the national insurance tax, she could have easily exempted hospices, care homes, or charities. She could easily have done that, but instead it's a blanket tax them all. And then she digs her heels in with this sort of arrogant stupidity and stubbornness that says, I'm not changing it. For goodness sake, listen and change, because if you don't, I mean, I really will be surprised if she is Chancellor this time next year.
I'm amazed at the mistakes made, but I'm also amazed at the mistakes made by the Tories, who they introduced VAT because they wanted to justify a reduction in income tax. And yet they are not advocating a change or simplification or a reduction of income tax to say, it's your money until you spend it, and then we'll work out where the tax should come from depending on where you spend it. I don't care whether you do it on the spending or whether you do it on the income and receiving, but we shouldn't be alarming slicing so that people's net effective tax rate is 60, 65, 70%. It's not right.
No, it isn't right. And I mean, the economy is in a really bad way, and it's going to get worse as more tariffs come in from Trump.
And also, once April, I think, as T.S. Eliot said, April is the cruelest month. And I think it could well be, because once these taxes start hitting home, and don't forget, our friends in the trade unions haven't yet rattled the cage.
Oh, they will do.
They've been very quiet, and around summertime, when most people like to travel, they're very good at having a lot of strikes then. I see on the horizon, sadly, an awful lot of trade union activity, because they've been very, very quiet, which is sinister.
They have been very, very quiet. But then I think we've seen what the unions might be capable of in Birmingham.
Yes.
And that might be a prelude for what may be about to come.
Well, Birmingham, of course, the Labour Council, which is already bankrupt, and now the place is awash with rubbish and must be a massive health hazard. I feel sorry for everyone living in Birmingham. Mind you, I mean, I wouldn't choose to live there because of the Labour Council and its appalling behaviour.
But then you've got the Labour mayor here in London. He's doing everything he can to ruin our great city.
Yes, he is indeed. He wishes to drive people away.
What do you like about the idea?
Hammersmith Bridge.
Oh no! Well, one of the plans was that they were going to knock it down or something.
Yeah.
Just before I let you go, what do you think of the Labour plan? This report here seems to indicate that their top choice, Labour's top choice to oust Sadiq Khan, because they've had enough of him, Idris Elba.
Yes. Well, good. I mean, he's an actor, so you can put on a good front. I think that's absolutely pointless.
Oh, he has done a good job with his knife crime campaign, though.
Well, he's done a knife crime campaign. That's one thing, but that doesn't make him a suitable mayor.
Look, any ABK?
I like actors to stick to acting.
Oh, come on, but you must have been a Ronald Reagan fan.
I was a Ronald Reagan fan.
Well, then there you go. Yes. He didn't stick to acting. What about Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Yeah. Well,
hey, your favourite Donald Trump. He was in Home Alone.
Well, he was in of course, The Apprentice.
The Apprentice,
which is basically acting. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Donald Trump's not my favourite, so I have to be a bit careful there.
He's not your favourite?
No.
That's a delicate way of putting it.
Yes.
So you wouldn't like to be in the same room as him?
I'm not sure how long I'd last.
Oh. What,
I'd only want to be in the room if it was on the ground floor. Let me put it that way.
Wow. And on that bombshell, we must leave it. Thank you very much indeed, Piers Pottinger. Thank you very much indeed for joining us here on Talk. Where next, we are going to get Angela Levin's views of that front page story of Prince Harry. Is he a bully? Says the charity chief. But what happens next? We'll speak to Angela. That's coming up next on Talk.
He then called her the N-word 3 times. This is
Blimey.
yeah.
That's probably a bit worse than
Isn't that
misgendering.
worse?
Absolutely.
Yeah, battle of the what's the worst insult?
So she was dealing with, this was a prison
Her name's
inmate.
Jennifer Melee, apparently. By
Yeah,
the way.
this is a prison inmate who had come for a doctor's appointment.
Oh, yeah.
And she's the one who's in trouble, even though he tried to lunge at her, called her the N-word 3 times, but because she described a male-specific problem on the phone to another colleague to explain what was going on with this
That is
patient,
bonkers, isn't it?
she is now potentially going to lose her job.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
9:31 is the time. Come back to your calls and comments in just a few moments' time. Front page of the Sunday Telegraph, but it's kind of everywhere. Harry is a bully, says Charity Chief. Centre Barley chairman accuses Duke of using the press for harassment at scale. But who's right on this? Do you have any sympathy for Harry? Do you think this time maybe it's gone a little bit too far? Let's find out what the royal commentator Angela Levin has to say about it. Angela, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us on Talk. So, look, he's kind of done it again, ended up on the front pages. There's a bit of me that says, well, when all the trustees stepped down, I thought there's probably another side to this. I think there is another side to this. We've now heard from the chair of the charity trustees, who, of course, is defending their position. And Piers Pottinger, who I was speaking to just before, had a little bit of sympathy for Harry, saying, well, maybe we got somebody who just got a little bit above their station in terms of what they wanted to do, and it's caused all these problems. What would you say to that? Who's at fault?
Well, I don't think you can say who is at fault. I think it's a most extraordinary fighting match between them. I think Harry hasn't been used to anybody telling him to stop doing something or that he was doing something wrong, apart from Meghan. People have been scared, and they've been very scared of Meghan as well, because what happens is this absolutely bomb of the Sussex Brigade, which actually Dr. Sophie Chandra-Dorku said. You know, she is now the wondering or hoping that she can stay as chair because she wants to do this. And Harry has said that he would like to come back when she's gone. So this is a long time thing. And
it is, but as a charity chair of trustees, if you lose the confidence of the other trustees, then it's not like a job. You do have to go.
Well, yes, that's true, except that she said that she felt that so many of the people who were part of that have been there sort of 12, 15 years, and you don't have any freshness. You don't have new thoughts. You don't have people who want to make it even better in these years, because it's very different from how the place started years ago. And actually, it's true, because then it was all about orphans from parents who had died of terrible diseases and HIV. So that now it's much more, learning how to cope with work and doing things. So I can understand why you would want different people. But what actually is very wrong is that Harry decided to leave without telling her. I think that's dreadful. He didn't say anything to her that he was going. And the other thing is, which goes back to last year, which I wondered about earlier, was that she was, if you remember the polo game, which was money for the charity, and Meghan didn't want her to stand next to Harry, and Meghan was being very angry and pointing and being cross. and he wanted her to come the other side of her, away from Harry, so she couldn't hold the award. Now, after that, they made a big fuss that she should go and speak to the press and say, Meghan wasn't mean to me, and support her and say how lovely she was. Well, she wasn't going to do that, so she refused. So there's that darkness around Meghan.
And isn't it interesting that you know, this is not about aspects of governance or otherwise. This is about somebody who's either, you know, loosely involved or partly involved, and it's all about sort of personality and how people are dealt with and where they stand with the pictures and bits and pieces. And also, I suppose, you know, deference, that if you are chair of a group of charity trustees, you do expect to be able to chair that organisation regardless of how famous or supportive or anything else any of the individuals might be, and so managing that ego. But you know this better than most. How difficult or otherwise is working for Harry and Meghan? I mean, I guess one has to try and be objective, but how difficult is it, and why is it difficult?
Well, it's a nightmare because Meghan thinks that she's very, very important in the world, and she's got to do what she wants, and she's got to be right. So if you're doing something for her, you're never really very good. And Harry is full of anger and resentment, and I think that it is very difficult. I've been attacked by the squad, Sussex squad, and I know loads of journalists who have as well. If you don't actually say how wonderful Meghan is and you aren't nice about her, then you are bullied, and it's very nasty bullying.
Okay, so how does that manifest? So for people listening, and you say, well, you've been the target of it, so clearly, of course, you've written various things in the past, so it does get sort of more public prominence. But how does that, you know, attack, if you like, how does it manifest itself? Is it behind the scenes? Is it stuff that we see? Is it stories that suddenly appear? What is it?
It's emails and getting in touch with you in various ways. And actually, I've been, you know, someone's going to come and kill me, someone's going to rape me, you know, I stink, I'm revolting. It's all that. And although you push it aside, it does worry you actually who's doing it. And they can be very ghastly. I know somebody who they then set up an organisation that actually would make them feel that they were completely hopeless. And I think that that's very much coming from Meghan. And Harry now she's brought out in him his aggression and his feeling that he's not doing what he really wanted. And so that it's very nasty. And you know, Meghan, she was calling people up at 3 or 4 in the morning, asking them to do something, and never satisfied, you know, very angry with what she was given. And Harry just trails along because the main thing to him is people have got to love Meghan, and he is very scared of her. And so if she gets furious that someone said something about her, maybe all this nonsense she's doing of selling clothes and all that, she just goes mad. She just goes really angry.
Okay, so what happens next with all of this? I mean, I'm assuming that there's going to be some kind of investigation, but I can't imagine that this stays, you know, with Harry as a bully, says charity chief. We've had 2 interviews now, one on Sky News, one elsewhere, I think. You know, she's said what she's said. It's unlikely that Harry is going to remain silent, is it?
No, he won't remain silent, but then neither will she. She's a very coherent, clever, educated woman, and she's not going to be taken for a ride or talked to as if she's got nothing to say. No, I think the thing is they can't say that she's a racist. That's a big deal. That they usually call everyone who's negative about what they say, oh, they're a racist, even when they're just saying what they don't like. And I think that's, she avoids that. But there should be a meeting for them, but she's taking them to court at the moment. So that will cost an awful lot of money and probably take over masses of money from the charity. So it's very bad, but she's very determined that they're not going to let Harry get away with it. But Harry has loved that charity since he came out of school. And it's very important to him because it links him to his late mother. But he should have told her, they should have sat down, maybe had a row, maybe talked properly and worked out how they could do something, instead of him just saying, I'm going, I'm not here, we've walked off. And then she's got to make sure that people don't think she's terrible. I mean, there are questions about this. She wants to be paid $2,000 a day, which I think is an extraordinary amount of money when you're working on that. But Harry hasn't been there for 5 or 6 years. And so, you can't do that from America into Africa. So it is a terrible mess. But what interests me is the children who are there. If they're so busy arguing and fighting, what's going to happen to the children? They're the ones who need looking after. They're the ones who actually are the most important thing of the whole thing. And it would be very, very sad if they suffer rather than two sort of angry people who don't like being told what to do.
Well, I think it's a story that's going to run and run, and as you say, probably not going to stay silent for too often after that headline. Harry is a bully, saying the charity chief. Role commentator Angela Levin, thank you very much indeed for joining me here on Talk. After the break, we're going to be speaking to Love Island star and host of Mum's Club podcast, Amy Hart. We'll be discussing her brand new podcast, which goes through the ups and downs of parenting. That's coming up next on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
9:45 is the time. 10 o'clock, Peter Cardwell will be here with your Sunday morning show. And so that means that we've got about 15 or so minutes together. We'll be taking some more calls very shortly. And also I've got a whole stack of messages to get through, which I will bring you up to date. However, before we do that, I think I need to update you on something and introduce you to Amy Hart. So each Friday there's going to be a new podcast from the former Love Island star Amy Hart. She welcomes a gaggle of guests to talk about the ups and downs of parenting. Well, I think we need to find out a little bit more. Amy Hart joins me now. Amy, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much indeed for joining. Dare I say, another mum's parenting podcast. I mean, we had Rob Beckett and everything in the parenting hell. So what do we need from another podcast? What are you doing which is different?
It's for the listeners. So we have sort of two sections. So we have an interview every week, whether that be with an influencer or a celebrity, or I've got some like true life stories from like literally my immediate circle that I can't wait to share as well. And then every week the callers and the viewers, they can send in questions and then we answer them like you do in your show.
Excellent. So talk to me about some of the guests that you're likely to have, because for people like me, haven't got a Scooby-Doo about influencers, other than, I like El Burrito Monster and I enjoy watching his stuff, and I guess I've got a whole load of people on Instagram that I watch and they do all the things that they do, but I'm not necessarily up to speed with the influencers that I need to know. So who are the sorts of people that we're going to hear from, and why have you picked them?
So we started off with actually my mum, because we thought that was a really nice way to start, with it being Mother's Day today, just to sort of like set the scene and learn a bit more about what it was like to parent me. Not easy.
Right.
And then from there we've got Kelsey Parker, who was married to Tom Parker from The Wanted, and about her journey navigating grief with her children. We've got Annabelle Carmel coming up, who's like the most iconic like children's nutritionist, so talking about weaning and things you can cook and making sure your kids get everything they need sort of food wise. We've got Tiffany Watson from Made in Chelsea, who has got a little boy the same age as my little boy and is also pregnant again. Laura Hamilton, all about travelling with children. She presents A Place in the Sun. So we've got loads of people coming up.
Excellent. I think we should probably have a little listen, so let's do that now.
Hi, I'm Amy Hart and I have some very exciting news. I am launching a brand new podcast, Amy Hart's Mums Club, where each week I'll be joined by fabulous guests to talk about the highs and lows of being a parent and delve into their parenting journeys. And that is not all. We'll be answering your questions every week as well, so you can send them in and we will do our best to help you.
Look online how pedantic people are about the smallest of things. I don't know what people actually want me to do, because if I don't move on, people go, God, she needs to get over it now, doesn't she?
It was really difficult. I felt quite isolated and alone. I mean, that's kind of how social media came in for me.
It is a babysitter, and I would 100% recommend that to anyone of you that's getting married. They don't mind doing it until it's 10 o'clock and the shots come out.
I'd had miscarriage before. I was like really nervous that something was going to go wrong during my pregnancy, so I didn't want to almost like be organised and jinx it.
How did you feel when Casa Amor was
going on? It was really hard sitting watching that all unfold. I was so distressed about it. I just couldn't walk down the street. It was really hard.
Okay. Then people used to like have babies in caves. There was no YouTube in caves. You'll be able to watch and listen every Friday, and I cannot wait for you to hear it. So I'll see you soon.
So there you go, Amy. So that's the little trailer there to show what people might be able to delve their way into. You know, I mean, you've obviously recorded some of these, and they'll be coming out every Friday.
Yes.
You know, for those who are listening now, you know, they may or may not be parents or otherwise. What are the revelations? What are the things that is like? Okay, you've got to listen, because I mean, where are the best conversations?
Every week has been so amazing with different things of like, oh, I didn't know you were going to tell me that. Like Kelsey on Friday is going to be amazing. I think she's done a lot of podcasts recently, but there's a lot that she says on ours that she hasn't said anywhere else. So I'd really recommend people to listen to that. And I just think like getting top tips off people, and I'm quite nosy, so I sort of delve in and ask people questions that I wouldn't normally ask them.
Well, I think that's always helpful. And I guess, look, when it comes to parenting, who knows? I mean, who knows what you're doing? And therefore, you know, having that ability to ask people other, you know, their advice or other. And then presumably the sorts of questions that you're expecting people to get in touch with are sometimes funny, sometimes ridiculous, and sometimes very important.
Yes, a nice mix would be lovely. And just I get questions every day on my Instagram about, you know, what do you use with Stanley for this? And, you know, what do you do for this? What do you recommend for this? So it's just a way to sort of get that out to more people.
And what's the strangest question you've ever been asked?
Maybe about like sleep with Stanley, because he is a little wonder baby. Like it's 9:49 and he's still asleep upstairs. So everyone always asks me about that.
I think I only wanted to ask you that question because I wanted you to mention the name Stanley again on the basis that that's the name of my dog. And I don't know whether I feel bad for the child that they got a dog's name or bad for the dog that he's got a human name.
The dog's definitely got a human name.
Right, of course he has. Although the dog was very cool, nearly called Daniel, because it was going to be Daniel the Spaniel. Anyway, there we go. Stanley it is. All the stuff from you. Amy, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. That's Amy Hart's new Mums Club podcast. It's every Friday. You can join that former Love Island star, Amy Hart. She welcomes her gaggle of guests to talk about the ups and downs of parenting. There you go. Get that from your podcast providers, should you wish. Meanwhile, we'll be turning back to your calls in a second. 0344 499 1000. It's all coming up here on Talk.
She contradicted herself. She said it'll never be allowed to happen under a Labour government. So we brought forward proposals to legislate. She said, oh, no, leave it with me. But I can assure the nation 100% that I'm on the side of fighting two-tier justice, and it will never happen under a Labour council. Guess what? It's about under a Labour government.
But wasn't she right, Graham, to at least... Wasn't she right?
She was, when we raised it.
But wasn't she right? But wasn't she right to just say, actually, let's give this a go. Let's try to reason with these people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
9:53 is the time. At 10, Peter Cardwell is here, and he'll be here very shortly to tell you what's coming up this morning. Meanwhile, back to your calls in a sec. However, I've got some messages. So Carol says, James, on the subject of migrant hotels, contrary to what your guest has said, I recently watched a video made by somebody working undercover at the Copthorne Hotel, which is 4-star, worth a watch, real life. Thank you for that, Carol. Tony says, hi, James, can you explain to me how you claim asylum from nowhere? Don't know. Sharon says, when's the next election so I can vote for Idris Elba, please? This with the news that Labour seem to be favouring the idea of Idris Elba as the London mayor to get rid of Sadiq Khan. Interesting idea. Sadiq Khan would be nowhere near London without the Muslim vote, says Darren. Adam says, if we can knock up Nightingale hospitals in such a short space of time, why can't we build a Nightingale Asylum hotel in a more appropriate place? Interesting point. Typical Labour blaming hotel owners, says Mike. And what about the poor staff these hotels who have lost their jobs now? And Chris says, strange how hotels have never been an option for the British homeless for the past decades. Anyway, there we are. Let's go back to your calls now. Oh, look, it's Lenny in Ashford. Hello, Lenny.
Good morning, James.
Good morning, Lenny.
Well, I wanted to confront the Labour gentleman that you had on.
Oh, yeah.
When he said Labour are reducing the appointments at the hospitals.
Well, that was Paul Richards, and I guess where his point is fair is that they did heave a whole load of money towards the doctors. They ended the strikes, and that has reduced some of the waiting lists.
Well, I've got two identical letters for two different ailments.
Right.
And what it seems to be the common practice, I would say what it says, you have been referred to a clinic at my local hospital, the William Harvey Hospital.
Right.
Right. They do not give you an appointment. And what it says, please wait until the 15th of May. If we do not contact you, then phone us back. They're not giving anybody appointments. That is why the list is going down.
And well, then maybe that's another way of dealing with it. And I suppose that's one of the other problems that we've got is that when you have so many people with appointments, but then also an appointment system that doesn't really sort of work very well and doesn't deal with cancellation, changing or moving.
Well, there's no excuse. They're not even giving people appointments when you need them. And what happened on the first letter that I received, when I phoned them up on the appropriate date, I'd just been transferred to another department.
So how long have you been waiting, Lenny?
For the first one, about 3 months.
And how long are you going to have to wait?
Well, I mean, I have I've phoned up as they requested, and they said we will be contacting you in the near future.
So you don't even know how long you're going to have to wait?
No.
Oh. Well, Lenny, there we must leave it. Well, maybe when you find out, that'll be breaking news. Call back in. Speak to you very soon, I'm sure. There we go. That's Lenny in Ashford. Thank you. Meanwhile, we must turn our attention to Peter Cardwell, who's here. He's on at 10. Hello.
Good morning, James. How are you?
Good, thank you. Another busy day on the way. Harry is a bully, says Charity Chief. That's a story.
Yes, we're certainly talking about that. We're also talking about 10,000 people who came here on visas now in asylum hotels.
Amazing.
Why are we spending £3.1 billion a year on the migrant hotel bill?
But also, why are we just shoving it off onto employers to do the job that the Home Office should be doing?
Well, exactly.
It makes no sense.
We're going to talk to a Labour MP in just a second who's broken ranks, and he says that the Sentencing Council should be abolished on this two-tier justice story I've been banging on about for weeks now. We're also going to be talking about arrogant BBC bosses rejecting anti-Semitism training, and where is the coverage of the 6 anti-Hamas protesters in the Palestinian territories who have been protesting against Hamas? They've been tortured and murdered for doing so. We'll also hopefully, we're getting it firmed up, talking to a counsellor who was warned by police that helping the parents we spoke to yesterday in this big row about they complained about a school and were arrested. Well, the counsellor who tried to help them was warned that she could be in the firing line as well. So yes, really, this is where we come to people complaining about a school and then being arrested for doing so.
And meanwhile, the Met smashing down the door of a Quaker meeting house to arrest activists because they're thinking that they might have a protest. Well, I mean, you know, if they have the protest, I know.
This is where we are, James.
Hey, listen, I'm just going to leave you with news that we should perhaps turn our attention back to 1989. A Ford Escort has sold for over £50,000, 5 times the price of when it was new. It's a 1989 RS Turbo, Series 2, top speed of 128 miles an hour. It takes 8.3 seconds to go to 60 miles an hour. It's a bright red motor. It's got 3 owners. It's 5,673 miles. Interested?
Why is it going for 50 grand?
Because it's a classic, modern classic.
Oh, okay.
It's a Ford